Michael Copyright 2018. This book is a work of fiction. The names, characters, places, and incidents are the product of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemble to actual events, business establishments, locales, or persons, living or dead, is entirely coincidental. All rights reserved. No part of this publication may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means, electronic, mechanical, photocopying, recording, or otherwise, without prior written permission of both the copyright owner and the publisher. The only exception is brief quotations in printed reviews. The scanning, uploading, and distribution of this book via the internet or via any other means without the permission of the publisher is illegal and punishable by law. Please purchase only authorized electronic editions and do not participate in or encourage electronic piracy of copyrighted materials. Your support of authors' rights is appreciated. Published in the United States of America. Copyright 2018 Victoria Pinderlove in a book, all rights reserved. Chapter 1. Pellets of icy rain bruised Sophie's forehead as the cold Atlantic Ocean water splashed against her body. Desperate, she'd hired a man with a rowboat to take the 4 siblings along the coast of Maine towards safety. Sophie had to get her sisters out of this mess of hers, now. Because if she was cold, rail-thin 6-year-old Abigail must be freezing. Sophie hugged her sister tighter and hoped they made it to Cousin Kimberly's quickly. Another wave rocked the boat. Emily, 16, screamed her frustration to the howling wind. Part of Sophie understood that, not that she'd tell her. Isabella, brave at only 10 years old, reached out and shook Sophie's arm to get her attention. The waves are coming fast now, Sophie. Their luggage in the back of the small boat bounced underneath its precarious ropes. The front of the wooden craft lifted and dipped. Emily stared straight in front of them and pointed at a hunched figure in an overcoat. And the captain isn't moving, she was right. He hadn't moved since the sun went down. Sophie motioned for the next oldest to watch Abby closer, and she nodded her agreement. If only their mother hadn't died months ago, then Sophie wouldn't have put any of their lives at risk. For now she needed to pretend to be the grown-up at 22 that she was. She handed the 6-year-old over and said, "Be calm, Emily, hold Abigail while I check on him." Emily complied without complaint, which was unusual but timely. Sophie inched closer, holding the side of the boat as salt water splashed over the side. She knelt in front of the captain and stared into his open, lifeless eyes. Her heart raced. This wasn't good. Sophie poked him in the chest and called out his name. "Mr. Smithers?" From that one poke he fell backwards, stiff and unmoving. In the fall he knocked a few of their bags into the ocean. Was that her suitcase? No time to fret. The oars in his hands were slipping into the ocean. If they lost those, they were goners for sure. Without thinking of much else, Sophie reached over his dead body in the small boat and grabbed the wooden oars before they disappeared into the churning waves. Emily snorted, but covered her sister's head from the ice storm with her own arm. "I knew he was dead. If they didn't get off this boat onto land and inside a house, they were truly all going to die from exposure." A tremble raced through Sophie, but then she tried to imitate what their mom would sound like as she handled one crisis or another. "Emily, get Abigail over here and take this oar, we need to row." Emily came to the seat beside her with Abigail. Isabella followed and squished herself between them on the little seat. Sophie wouldn't want to be alone either, so she didn't say anything. Instead, she handed the oar to Emily and motioned for Abigail to curl back up in her lap while she rowed with the other. After the third push, Emily shouted, "We don't know where we're going." The 10-year-old tugged on her shoulder. "Are we going to die, Sophie?" Emily snorted but continued to steer. Good question, and Sophie had no answer. Right now none of them needed morbid thoughts, they had to work together. She pushed the oar toward her sister and said, "No, sweetheart, Essie, help me with this oar." Now they all rowed in unison and dodged a few of the waves that had previously washed into the vessel by going over them. Their luggage, tied by ropes in a fragile crate behind them, sounded like it cracked. Hopefully they wouldn't lose their only possessions to the sea. Abigail, the youngest, stayed snug between them away from the wooden edge. "How do we find Kimberly's house now? Ice is falling on my face." True, the ice and snow formed stinging droplets. If Abigail was being pelted and she was the most protected, they were all in trouble. The hat Sophie wore was so soaked it offered little protection. Sophie wanted to hug her baby sister but couldn't let go of the oar. Hoping to sound like Mom, she turned her head slightly and said, "An island right up the coast." Smithers knew where it was, so we're heading in the right direction. Right now we paddle. A huge wave rocked the boat, but Sophie pretended they were fine despite the cold spit of water that brushed against them all. Somehow she had to get her sisters out of here. So she kept pretending they were close. "I see land," Emily said with an excitement in her voice that Sophie hadn't heard in weeks, if not months. This time they worked as a family, which gave Sophie strength to paddle harder in the direction that Emily pointed. Soon giant rocks were all around them, jagged and surrounding this island like a protective gate. She didn't think this was the mainland. Once they found help or at least shelter from the storm, she'd figure out where they were and contact her cousin. She pushed the oar off one of the nearby rocks and they went further inland and out of the wild ocean. Sophie tried again to sound in charge and comforting. "See, I told you, we were close." Emily pushed them away from huge boulder near her side, doing the same, and asked, "Where do we steer to?" If she knew, she would have shared with them, Sophie thought to herself. The icy rain pelted against her hat even worse than before. "There." Essie pointed and shouted, "I think that's a beach." Sophie's gaze followed Isabella's gloved finger and it did seem like a beach. At least they'd get out of this small boat before the ocean knocked them all out and left them for dead. Teamwork. Sophie nodded and she and Emily propelled the boat toward the beach. It grew impossible to navigate once the boat was stuck in the sand. Icy rain soaked her skin under her ruined clothes. They'd all need dry things. Without asking for permission, Emily hopped out, the water coming to her waist. She reached for Abigail. Sophie handed her over and then carried Isabel to her chest. "Hang on." Once they were ashore, her wet jeans weighing each step, Sophie shivered with cold. The iciness was inside her limbs and she could hardly breathe. If she were alone, she'd probably fall to her knees and curl her legs to her chest, to use her own body heat, or what was left of it, to stay warm. However, warmth would require a fire that she didn't have, and right now they were all soaking from the ocean wind, snow and icy rain that beat down on their heads. None of them were dressed for the cold Atlantic. The jackets they bought were clearly for snow but not water and ice. Isabella and Emily's straight blonde hair under their hats looked sleek and wet. Abby and she with their straight brown hair weren't much better. All of their jeans were soaked right through and every one of her sisters must feel the same numbness in their thighs. Isabella tugged on her arm. "Now what, Sophie? The ice is even harder now." True, no use wishing for her mom. No one could help them except for her. She needed to keep the group moving. Offshore she saw evergreens, as well as bare branches of trees that had lost their leaves for winter. The desolate island would probably inspire a horror movie, but right now they needed shelter. Sophie took the Abigail's hand and then Isabella's while she directed them into the trees. Kim said it was a huge castle. "Let's head into the forest where at least the trees will shield us from the ice pellets." Everyone hold hands. Emily, such a teenager, sneered as she walked with her hands crossed before her. "We're not 5 anymore." Now was not the time for another argument with her sister. Sophie held both Abigail and Isabella's hands and appealed to Emily for help. "You're not Emily, I need you to be on the other end of Abigail so we don't lose anyone and we can move faster." Emily relented and smiled at her baby sister. It was a start toward acting like a family as their mom would want. "What about our luggage? Can we leave it on the beach until the morning, don't you think?" Sophie asked because right now the little ones needed protection. "If you and I work fast, we can save it for sure," Emily said, directing Isabella to stand with Abigail under a branch. Right, her sister had a point. Without complaint, Sophia pointed the 2 little ones under a tree and she ran to the boat. Emily did the same and grabbed 2 bags at a time to drag to shore. Sophie couldn't let this be the end. She finished with the bags and dragged them to the tree where the little ones huddled. "Leave them here for now." Emily dropped her 2 bags. Sophie wished again that her mother had survived that crash a few months ago. If her sisters had somewhere else to go, Sophie might have run faster on her own and not put her sisters in any danger. Now they were her responsibility and she couldn't fail them. This time the 4 of them walked, arm in arm, into the forest. Sophie's jeans chafed her skin and she couldn't wait to get them off her body. Isabella slowed down and came closer to her. "This place is dark," her sister said. Sophie could hear how fast her own heart beat in the shadows of the trees, but she tried to encourage her sister to move. Abigail trembled. Sophie knelt down beside them, thankful the bare branches kept some of the ice from hitting her face. She hugged both of the little ones. "Remember in your fairy tales that sometimes the princesses get scared in the forest at night but then they see its beauty. There is nothing pretty about this place," Isabella stated when the hug ended. "True." Emily's foot cracked a twig as she stepped toward Abigail. I think I see a house over there. The storm let the moonlight shine enough in the distance for them to see a huge mansion in the Gilded Age style, with lights on in the windows. Sophie's prayers had been answered. Hopefully this was Kimberly and her new husband's home. Isabella tightened her hold and said, "It looks more like a mansion than a castle." For a 10-year-old, her sister Isabella was always the most observant of them all. Sophie knew she was right. Sophie held both little girls tight, but they walked to the front gate. Maybe our cousin Kim made up the castle. Let's go in and knock. If this were a stranger's home, Sophie could only hope they'd take pity on the four sisters. No dog barked behind the black gate. It opened without question, and then they were under the protection of the house and out of the icy pellets. Sophie knocked on the door. Her knock echoed. The four of them huddled together and waited. It seemed like no one was going to answer. Sophie's mind raced on what they'd do. Where could they possibly go? The locks on the door clicked, and Sophie stood straight. A moment later, a gray-haired 60-something old man appeared, his hair slightly too long, his blue eyes piercing. Sophie held out her hand and offered to shake. "Hello." The man's expression seemed shocked at their appearance out of nowhere, but he took one look at the four of them and opened the door wide. "Who are you?" No one moved as the three younger siblings looked to her for permission. Sophie hugged Isabel. "Sir, it's cold outside and we're shivering. My sisters and I were on a boat to find my cousin, but the captain died. We were lost in the cold Atlantic in this storm." Lightning cracked behind them and thunder boomed in their ears. Sophie trembled. If they didn't get shelter, they'd freeze to death. "Please." The older gentleman waved them inside the warm house. "Come in." Once all four of them were in, he closed the door. "Wait here, let me get the master to see what he wants to do with you." "Master?" Sophie asked as he turned away. He motioned to his forehead with his index finger and said, "I just work here, ma'am." His footsteps were silent on the polished floor. Abigail let go of her hand and peeked down the hall. Sophie quickly scolded, "Everyone stay together and don't split up." "I'm shivering," Isabella said, her teeth chattering. Emily rolled her eyes but also had her hands wrapped around her waist, her mouth blue. "Don't be dramatic, Issy." "This isn't dramatic," Isabel countered, and her lip curled. Sophie's skin pebbled with goosebumps as if someone was watching her. Even her chest tingled with a warm sensation. A minute later, a tall, muscular, dark-haired man with intense eyes and full lips appeared on the landing above. As he came down the steps, her body felt flutters. "Sexy." He met her gaze and asked without blinking, "May I help you?" Her hand traced her neckline as she caught her breath. She asked through parted lips, "Are you the owner of this home?" He crossed his arms and widened his stance. "Yes." "Who are you and why are you here?" Isabella jumped in front of Sophie and said, "The captain of our boat died. We had to row ourselves and I found a beach and you're the first house we saw." He glanced down at Isabella and nodded. "I see." Sophie hugged Isabella closer and kept her hand on her sister's thin shoulder. "Sorry about my sister, sir. We're cold, wet, and the storm out there is bad. May we have shelter and then use your phone to call my cousin?" Mr. Sexy in black pants and a navy blue t-shirt motioned for the stairs. "You can stay for the night. Jack will get you to where you are going once the storm ends." Seriously, if Sophie was carefree, she'd have flirted, but her hand on Isabella's shoulder reminded her that she now had other responsibilities. Her gaze narrowed. "Who's Jack?" The older man came back and motioned for them to follow him. "Mr. Raman." Sexy at the same time said, "My servant. He'll show you to some rooms you can use. His wife Bernadette will see to the rest of your needs." Sophie let Isabella go and whispered to Emily, "Watch the other two 1 minute. I need to talk to the owner, but I'll be right behind you." Emily nodded, took Abigail's hand, then Issy's, and followed the older man. Sophie folded her arms under her chest and called after Mr. Sexy. "We really appreciate this. It was horribly cold out there, mister." He stepped back and avoided her gaze. "The less we know about each other, the better, for both our sakes." The dampness of the clothes on her body weighed on her. She shivered. From cold or apprehension, she wasn't sure, but she stepped toward the man who seemed like he was about to leave. "Why?" Teasing, she asked. "Are you on the run and hiding out in mansions in the middle of nowhere?" He turned, and his brown eyes seemed to burn into her soul. "None of that is your concern, miss." Sophie Mira, she held out her hand to shake. If he was part of her former employer's plan to silence her, she'd be dead already. This time she didn't blink or move as she just waited for him to respond. At last, he shook her hand, but he leaned closer. Sophie, names give power to people. I can go look you up in an instant and know more about you than you want me to know. In her old life, she'd have closed her eyes, puckered her lips, and kissed this stranger, but that was the old her. The one who didn't have responsibilities or hadn't testified at her employer's trial. She let out a sigh. I'd prefer we go our separate ways in the morning without looking at each other's social media profiles. I don't have those. His lips never puckered, and she stepped away from him. She winked at Mr. Sexy. It would be nice to have a name for her dreams tonight, because this was a man she'd want but could never have. Then your secret is safe even once I have a computer. It's better this way. He shook her hand again, and a thrill raced up her arm. She held him longer than was necessary, and her heart skipped a beat. I'd prefer to know your name. It's a simple request and not unreasonable. My name is Michael. Now I must go. He took his hand back like he'd been burned. She straightened her ruined wet sweatshirt that felt like it was part of her but met his gaze. He truly was handsome. Thank you for helping us, Michael. I appreciate it. He stared at her like he wanted her, and for a second her body anticipated a sweet kiss. However, he stepped away. Good evening, Sophie. Jack and Bernadette will see to dry clothes and food for you and your family. She had no secrets from him. They are my sisters, though I'm in charge of them since our mother died. Her voice cracked. His brown eyes darkened. He backed away from her. I see. I'm sorry about that. Good night. Right. Michael was branded in her mind as Mr. Sexy. Who cared about a last name? Sophie raced up the stairs and followed her sister's path by tuning into the giggles. In charge of them by default, she'd gotten them into this mess and she'd have to protect them until she could find a way out. Hopefully the ordeal was over now, and tomorrow they'd be at their cousin's without further delay. However, if she could see Michael one more time, she'd have her fill of dreams. Chapter 2. Sophie woke up in a bedroom so huge that it could house her entire family. Her bed had a dark blue comforter with flowers embedded in the fabric over cream-colored sheets. In the corner opposite her bed was a vanity that could double for a desk. To her right she had a small sitting table with chairs, and in the other corner was a reading nook with a chair and a small bookshelf. Someone could live in this room and never leave, except to go find food. Sophie threw the covers off, seeing that it was still dark outside, and cleaned herself up as best she could in the adjacent bathroom, which was far bigger than her bedroom at home. She had no clothes of her own, but last night she'd found a man's shirt that smelled like cedar wood and pajama bottoms lying on her bed. She'd worn them to bed but missed her clothes that were probably in the bottom of the ocean. Sophie headed out in borrowed slippers and saw the light on in the next room. She knocked on the door. Emily loved to read, so there was a good chance she would be awake. Come in, her sister said. Yes, there she was, lying in bed with a book. Emily sat up and pushed her long blonde hair behind her. This mattress is way more comfortable than my own. While her bedroom had been painted in white and blue, this room was a sunny yellow. Sophie's gaze went to the mix-matched luggage found in their mother's garage from who knew when near the door. Good, it seems your luggage is here. Emily stared at her. Then why are you wearing a man's t-shirt and plaid yellow pajama bottoms? Sophie grabbed her sister's robe from the hook near her bathroom without asking permission. My luggage fell into the ocean. Can you check on your sisters when they wake up? I want to go downstairs and explore the house, see when breakfast will arrive, stuff like that. Emily shrugged and didn't move out of the bed. Sure thing. When I finish my book, I'll shower and leave my door open in case Essie or Abby need to find me. Perfect. Be right back. At least the little ones had someone waiting for them while she went to search the house. At 16, Emily was sometimes the most helpful and sometimes the biggest pain since Sophie had taken her siblings in to share her condo. She wandered down the huge flight of stairs and stayed on the red carpet to silence her steps. Most of the lights in the house were still off, but downstairs after the foyer, a glow came from beneath a partially open door. Following the carpet runner in the hall, she stopped outside the door when she heard voices, intending to go inside. She froze when Jack said, "Sir, this woman appearing out of nowhere in the middle of the night might be your God-given opportunity to move on and forget about your plans." God-given? Sophie inched closer to the door. Michael's deep voice countered. God chose to forsake me long ago, and I will not give up my plan because a woman smiled at me. Her lips pursed. Why would anyone say the word forsake out loud? Michael was more religious than he let on with his word choice. She hedged around the wooden frame and saw Mr. Sexy. His thick, dark, coarse hair was carelessly grown. And he had the look of a man who didn't care what he looked like, including the scruffy face of his that could have shaved a few days ago but hadn't. Once again she had warm goosebumps and a wave of desire washed through her. "I saw the way you stared at the half-drowned woman," Jack said. "My wife said she's even prettier dry." Mr. Sexy waved his hands in the air and pointed toward his computer at his desk near the window. "I vowed to make them suffer as they have made me suffer. I don't have time for any woman, no matter how pretty. Who the heck were they? What did they do to him?" Sophie's mind raced with questions, but she stayed hidden behind the door. "Even if you succeed in your plan, what good is it to avenge your wrongs if you never move on, sir?" Jack's tone held disappointment. Michael pointed to the door. She jumped back and prayed they hadn't seen her. He said, "Jack, please ensure our guests are taken care of and they know where to get breakfast. I've got things to do." She ran back to the front of the house and up the stairs toward her room. Sophie hadn't meant to snoop, though, the way Mr. Sexy looked dressed in a simple white t-shirt and blue jeans made her pulse zip. Her breath came in pants as she slowed down near her sister's room, then knocked as she entered. "Emily, can I borrow one of your shirts? I'd like to not show up in a borrowed t-shirt." "Sure." Emily put the book down and went to her bag. Sophie waited next to her. Emily handed her a pink shirt with a rainbow and stars painted across the chest and a pair of white leggings. "I have another pair of yoga pants you can have too." Sophie's choices were yellow pajama bottoms or looking like a teenage wannabe. She took the clothes and hugged them. "Thanks." Emily continued rummaging through her luggage. "No problem. It sucks that it was your bag to go overboard. Oh, here is an exercise top that could work as a bra for you." "Right." Sophie spied the ensuite bathroom in her sister's room and crossed the floor. "I'll change fast." Wincing at her image in the mirror, Sophie's transformation into a teenager was now complete with the pink top and white pants. In Miami she'd have never worn this outfit, but she wouldn't complain. Hopefully when they arrived at their cousin's she could borrow more adult clothes. Emily opened the bathroom door without knocking. "Where is breakfast?" Essie and Abby were right behind her, so Sophie leaned down and hugged them both good morning. They smelled clean after their baths last night, and this morning their faces were bright and free of all worries. A knock sounded on Emily's bedroom door. Sophie straightened as Emily opened it. Jack bowed to all four of them. "This way, ladies." Her stomach growled. Her youngest sisters clearly trusted Jack as they bounced behind him in expectation of breakfast. They walked downstairs, and Sophie stayed closest to Abigail on the steps as they descended. Jack escorted them to a huge dining room with a table that could hold 20 people. One half of the table had more food prepared than a breakfast buffet restaurant. Her sisters immediately grabbed plates and served themselves. Sophie stayed near the door, next to Jack. Isabella put her plate of food at an empty seat, walked over to them and asked, "Where is Mr. Haniel? Is he not coming?" "Mr. Haniel?" Sophie sucked in her breaths. Her sister knew Mr. Sexy's name. She glanced at her sister. Once again Isabella was the smart, logical 10-year-old. Jack stood with his hands to his sides, like a soldier, but he smiled at her inquisitive sister. "Mr. Haniel is working, Miss Isabella." Izzy nodded and accepted this answer but said, "Well, tell him we'd like to see him and say thanks." Jack's smile grew bigger. "I will." The older gentleman with long gray hair, all pulled back as best he could, seemed more approachable. "Jack, thank you for getting our bags last night." Jack's head lowered and his face blushed red. "Miss Sophie, when you finish eating I'd like to speak to you." "Let's talk now." She slipped into the hall. Her sisters would eat for hours with that amount of food, as none of them ate much yesterday during the plane ride from Miami and then the awful boat trip. Last night they'd all crashed with exhaustion after a cup of soup. If he wanted to reveal any part of the conversation about Mr. Sexy, she was all ears. Jack closed the door and motioned for her to follow him closer to the library. She did, and once they were out of earshot of the dining room he asked, "What should we do with the boat, Captain?" His body washed ashore and he had no identification. "Right." Sophie blinked and was all business. Of course Jack wouldn't reveal anything about his boss. She crossed her arms. "His name was Josh Smithers. He was the only one willing to brave the storm for the cash I offered." She pushed her hair behind her ears and lowered her head. "I don't know his family or anything." Jack nodded. "I will pass that information on when we get in touch with the authorities in the spring." Her head jerked up and her ears burned, certain she'd misunderstood. "In the spring? I thought you were taking us to my cousin's today." Jack's head bobbed, but he avoided eye contact. Your boat is crushed on the rocks, unsalvageable. So, she put her hands on her hips. A shadow from inside the library moved. Jack turned with his face bright red and opened the door. Mr. Haniel, can you please explain to our guest why we can't bring her or her sisters to her cousin's island today? Michael walked toward them, his shoulders tight, but he patted Jack on the back. Okay, Jack. Jack took a deep breath, clearly relieved. The servant stepped back and motioned for her to enter the library. She followed and met Mr. Sexy's dark brown gaze with her own. She ignored the thrill that raced through her. Michael, what's going on? He motioned for them to sit at a desk. He took the seat opposite her and behind the expanse of oak instead of next to her. She tugged her pink rainbow and butterfly shirt lower, covering her bare abdomen, when he asked, "Why did you take a boat out in the middle of a storm?" "Business, she could do that." She crossed her legs and held his gaze. "It's not your concern, I need to get to my cousins." Michael nodded without pressing her further and leaned forward, folding his hands on top of his desk. "There is a problem, I have no way off of this island. I thought Jack could take your boat, but it's destroyed. You were lucky you made it to shore alive. So this man in this house where he could give all of her sisters their own room for the night and still have enough room for 40 more guests if he chose, didn't have a boat of his own?" Her muscles tightened. "You have a huge mansion in the middle of nowhere." He sat back in his chair, one eyebrow lifted. "Which you are free to enjoy for the winter until transportation arrives." At least he'd shelter them, but yesterday he'd promised to take her straight to Kimberly's. Something changed and she didn't really believe that he couldn't get a boat. She uncrossed her legs and stood. "Why not now?" He stood as well and towered over her. Luckily there was a desk between them. "I've paid every boat owner in the area to avoid my island, including my own yachts. I wanted to be left alone this winter. Life happened, things changed." Her sisters needed to be safe from her own deal where she'd trusted the FBI and they'd left her floating in the wind. Her heart raced. "So we can call the Coast Guard. Mr. Smithers died, and you don't want us here. You said yesterday it wasn't far. Or I can call my cousin to see if she can come here." His voice grew deeper as he spoke, and his hands curled into fists at his side. "The truth is that I can't have anyone interfering with my plans. You and your sisters will be comfortable. April 1st, my yacht will arrive, and I will ensure your safety wherever you want to go. I can't do more than that, or it risks people discovering where I am." Her sisters screamed at each other from the dining room. Sophie jumped backwards at the noise. They had to figure out something else. She needed to be at her cousin's, so she and her sisters were hidden and safe. The FBI was supposed to arrest her boss without leaving her or her family in harm's way. Another screech. She rushed to the door but called over her shoulder, "Michael, I have to see to that, but I'll be right back. We need to finish our conversation." Perhaps being here was divine intervention. Everyone would assume she was dead anyhow when the wooden boat didn't return. If they stayed tucked away here, her biggest worries would be clothes and her raging crush on Mr. Sexy. Chapter 3. Sophie ran toward the dining room to see what caused her sister's argument, hearing name-calling from the hall. She threw open the dining room door and saw Emily and Isabella with their arms crossed in conflict as Abigail continued to eat cereal, watching avidly. Sophie walked in and touched Isabella's shoulder. She turned and shook her head like she was their mother instead of her 10. "Sophie," Emily said, "I'll get fat if I eat more pancakes." Her sister's nose curled as she shook her head. Great. The last thing Isabella needed was a teenage complex about weight. But if she argued with Emily or took sides, she'd cause more drama. Sophie's more pressing concern was the talk with Michael. She needed to be the adult, so Sophie chose her words and kept her voice low. "Emily, everyone is hungry today. None of us ate well the past few days. Please don't taunt Isabella right now." Emily stirred her fruit and yogurt bowl. "I'm warning her, no boy will find her attractive if she eats like a horse." Isabella rolled her eyes. "You don't even know what horses eat, Emily." Emily stared at Izzy with her big doe eyes that claimed innocence, though from this conversation she was anything but. "And you do? Apples, oats, barley, hay for starters." Isabella stuck out her tongue. This time Emily rolled her eyes. Whatever. Both of them needed to stop. But instead of scolding, Sophie took a second, collected her thoughts and listened to the quiet at the table. She held her tongue and again listened to their quiet. "Good." She patted Isabella on the back and asked them all, "Can I trust you to stop fighting for a few more minutes? I need to finish my conversation with Mr. Haniel." Emily winked at her and swallowed her yogurt bite before she said, I saw how you froze near him yesterday, sis. If you need help talking to a guy, I'm more than glad to give you a few pointers. I'm doing fine, Emily, thanks, Sophie said fast. The last thing she needed was to sound like her sister or her sister's friends near Michael, especially now that things had changed. She had no idea how she'd break the news to her sisters that they were going to stay here. It was best to speak with Michael and see if she could change his mind. She closed the dining room hall and ignored the hum in her veins that was excited to see Mr. Sexy. She knocked on the library door and let herself in. Michael stood from the desk already as she closed the door behind her. Sorry about that. He leaned against the desk, his arms crossed. His dark brown eyes called to her despite his defensive body posture. No worries. We finished our conversation as far as I'm concerned. She stood in front of him. Every part of her skin felt alive as she waited, gathering her thoughts. His intense stare made her believe he'd mentally stripped her, though he never made a move. Her heart raced, and she brushed her hand against his forearm. No, we didn't. Why can't you take us, really? He shook his head. He wouldn't budge. She could see that. If we do end up staying here, can you handle my sisters being around? I know you're busy, but they're going to get bored and they'll want the internet and things like that. He tugged his arm back like she'd burned him. You'll need clothes. I've already asked Bernadette to find my mother's trunk for you. It's not much, but it will clearly be better than your current attire. Granted, her sister's taste in clothes was horrendous. The pink shirt was more like a midriff on her, but she tugged it down and asked, Do my clothes bother you? He looked down at her. Her body trembled. I'm tempted to touch you, and we both know that's a bad idea. Her lips tingled and she closed her eyes, not thinking it was a terrible idea at all. Neither one of them moved, and she took a breath, realized she was dreaming, opened her eyes and asked, Can I be honest with you? He crossed his arms again, edging her backward. I already thought we were. Right now she needed to ignore the urge to run her hands through his thick dark hair. To be a temptation, she'd never been that woman. Instead, she lowered her arms to her sides, glanced down and stood in front of him. I'm on the run. I was going to my cousin's with my sisters in tow because I became a witness for the FBI against my boss at work. She glanced up and saw his eyes had widened. She'd shocked him, this man who was hiding for the winter. Sophie took a breath and finished her story. I thought they'd protect me, but when my boss found out, someone tried to break into my condo and shoot me. I packed my sisters one suitcase each and we were headed to my cousin's. If we stay here, I might put you in jeopardy. That's not right. He reached out and brushed her arms, leaving a trail of heat and longing in his wake. I've handled a lot worse than businessmen with guns in my day, so you can handle it. She met his questioning stare without flinching. I won't let anyone near you or your siblings under my care, Sophie. Now her heart whispered she should kiss him because every part of her body melted. She held herself in place but imagined curling her arms around his neck and giving herself to him. Instead, she stepped backwards and tried to sound maturer. What about children who are bored? He winked at her, lowered his arms and sat on the edge of the desk, making his face almost eye level. You'll mostly handle that one. I'm sure I have an iPad around here somewhere, but I'll need you to ensure none of your sisters reveal where we are. Done. I'll talk to them about it. Thank you, Michael. Without thought, she wrapped her arms around his neck and hugged him close. His body was like a furnace, and the moment she touched him, she ignited like she was Persephone being stolen away to Hades in the underworld. He placed his hands on her hips but didn't push her away. She felt his erection growing between them as he murmured, Don't hug me, it's dangerous. Instead of slipping away as he asked, she clung. He even smelled like a man, full of testosterone mixed with the evergreen trees outside his home. She blinked and tried to at least sound put together. I'm thanking you. His hands traced her bare midriff and sensations blossomed in parts of her she hadn't known existed. Sophie, I want to rip that shirt and those tight pants off your body and take you, right here, right now. She lowered her lashes and tried to be rational, but the sensation of his touch on her lower back that brushed against her butt made her body come alive. Michael, you and I are a bad idea for now because we have to live together. I agree. He removed his hand. She put it back. Don't stop. His lips came closer to hers and her body buzzed with anticipation. I better, your sisters are in the next room. The moment his lips claimed hers, she was lost. His slightly rough skin against her face made her wild. Her hands ran through his thick, coarse, dark as night hair and then lower. His backside was perfect. His strong shoulders hid the muscles that held her close. Most important was his kiss. She surrendered entirely to him and he could do whatever he wanted to her. Isabella cried out, "Sophie!" Footsteps sounded in the hall. Michael pulled her off him and adjusted himself behind the desk, taking a seat. Sophie fixed her hair, which was definitely messy, and hoped his kiss wasn't obvious on her face. The door flew open a moment later and her 10-year-old sister rushed inside. She stopped and stared at them, and for 1 second Sophie thought her sister knew what had happened. Then Isabella smiled and said, "There you two are. I wanted to thank Mr. Haniel for letting us sleep here last night. Your place feels like a mansion. You're very welcome." Michael's voice held no animosity. He even smiled when he said, "And you're all safe here." Isabella stared at her and then pointed to the door. Sophie's time with Michael was over. She'd put her hands in her pockets if the leggings had pockets, so she awkwardly hugged her waist instead. "Guess I'm going to breakfast." He waved from the safety of his chair behind the desk. "Enjoy yourself, Sophie." Hunger should make her leave, but instead she hungered for whatever Michael had intended. She'd come alive in his arms when she hadn't allowed herself to feel for months. She walked to the door but then hedged. "If I wanted to continue our, conversation later." The gleam in his eyes darkened. "It's not a good idea. We'll discuss that later too," she answered fast. Sex was going to complicate this winter on a deserted island, but she wanted to know what complicated was like. All her life she'd been responsible, and she was even more so now. She knew nothing about Michael other than he was handsome and strong. His gaze met hers and for a moment nothing else moved. Finally he gave in and said, "I'll have dinner at 8 p.m. If you can join me alone, Sophie, you're more than welcome." "Perfect." Dinner sounded good enough. "Okay, see you tonight then." She closed the door and walked with Isabella back to the dining room. Chapter 4. Sophie put her fork down when she'd finished her plate of hash browns, eggs, toast, and turkey bacon, comfortably full. Tonight she'd see Michael and it might be best to eat lighter for lunch, but at least her hunger pains were gone. Her sisters stayed and talked while she ate. Once she was done, she moved her plate aside and said, "Girls, we need to talk." Emily immediately pulled her chair closer to the table. "Do we have to go in another boat today?" Her expression turned wary. "I like being dry and warm." "Me too," Easy added. Sophie reminded herself not to let the wine in Emily's voice crush her spirit. She leaned closer and tried to explain as best she could. "Here is the thing. Mr. Smithers' boat was crushed from the rocks once we left it last night." Emily sat back in her chair and rolled her eyes. "He's dead. He doesn't need it where he is now." "Emily," Sophie said while her hand pressed against her heart. It wasn't right to speak of the old captain with anything but respect. Her sister stared at her like she was the wronged one, though her shoulders fell. "It's true. It's not nice." The three of them waited expectantly for her to say more. If they asked logical questions, she was sunk. Mr. Sexy had offered a huge breakfast to them, had a mansion and servants. He'd have anything he wanted by snapping his fingers. She felt her cheeks heat. "Anyhow, Mr. Haniel doesn't have a ship of his own here right now. So we're stuck here?" Emily asked. A huge breath released. They'd accepted it as truth with no other questions asked. "Good." She took a swig from her water glass. Essie sighed. "I like it here. I want to explore and go on an adventure." Emily laughed with sarcasm. "You would call this an adventure?" "Adventures are cool," Essie countered but dropped her head lower. Sophie sipped her water again, and when she finished she met everyone's gaze, one at a time. "We will be here until April. Mr. Haniel is going to let us stay in his house, but we have to be mindful and not behave like we own anything here. If he throws us out, we're all in big trouble, but no one will find us here." Easy glanced up. "And Mr. Haniel is nice." "True." Emily never blinked as she stared back at her. "That's why we need to get you a push-up bra, Sophie." Sophie's face felt hot immediately. Was it possible Emily saw Sophie's attraction to Mr. Sexy so clearly? She prayed no. She then glanced at Isabella and Abigail. They were way too young to hear this discussion. Sophie tugged at her shirt and said, "Stop it. Emily, we use our brains and our hard work to get out of unfortunate situations, not our bodies." "If you say so, sis," Emily said with a snicker, obviously not believing her. Sophie met her gaze but motioned with her eyes to the others. "This is a conversation outside of little ears." "Whatever." Emily slouched in her chair. Sophie turned back to her youngest two sisters and hoped no one else asked her about Mr. Devour. Sexy or what they'd done in there this morning. None of them needed to know. "So, I need you all to promise to behave and not destroy anything." Essie nodded. "Of course." "Good." Everyone was on the same page. Sophie sat back a little and met Isabella's knowing blue eyes and Abigail's darker brown eyes. Okay, if you need me, I'm going to explore a little too, but I'll be back in my room within the hour. Abigail stood, but Essie took a second and winked like she was already a teenager too. We'll all help you get ready for your date tonight with Mr. Haniel. Sophie has a date? Emily perked up and assessed her again. Sophie's entire body and not just her face felt hotter than fire burning coals. Isabella stood from the table but glanced at Emily. They are having dinner alone. Emily stood, ready to go as well. I'll find you a push-up bra. Sophie shook her head. They needed to talk, but without the youngest two. Emily's attitude had to be cleared up fast. Sophie hugged her waist and tried to sound like their mother. Emily, can you stay for a minute? I see, you and Abby stick together until we're comfortable with this house. If either of you gets scared, go to my room and wait for me if I'm not there. Isabella walked out the door with Abby. Okay, but the storm is gone. Can we go check out the snow? In Miami they didn't have snow. Before yesterday's ice storm she'd have wanted to go with them. However, they weren't prepared for this kind of cold. Their winter gear was soaked through and hopefully drying somewhere. She'd have to ask Jack. Not now. We'll try to find jackets for you later. I don't think we packed the right stuff for winter. Isabella's shoulders bowed as she agreed. Okay, Emily walked to the door to follow the girls out. Was she trying to avoid their conversation? Sophie channeled her mother's voice. Emily, we need to talk. Emily closed the dining room door and turned toward Sophie. Sophie pushed her hair out of her eyes, wished for a hair clip or an elastic and said, Our mom would never condone what you said. We don't use push-up bras to get our way. Emily let out a dramatic sigh and then took a seat, motioning for Sophie to follow. Sophie did as she requested and Emily said, Sis, our mom had 3 different husbands and none of them offered to take any of their own kids when she died. It's why we're all with you now. At least you didn't abandon us too. Mom survived because she married for money and we both know it. Wow, her sister had it all backwards. Their mother was sweet and not predatory. Sophie took her hands. No, we don't. Mom told me she was in love, but they all broke her heart. Emily tugged her hands free and crossed her arms. Get real, she said that because you're sensitive. If Mom was younger and here, she'd have made a play for Mr. Haniel. Just like she did when she dumped my dad for Sean, Essie and Abigail's father. Given this new information, she had to douse her attraction to Mr. Sexy. Her stomach felt queasy and she prayed she'd find a way to break through to Emily that sex didn't equal love and their mother Maria had fallen in love more than once. She just had trouble keeping relationships. Sophie's pulse grew faster. She leaned closer so no one else might come in the room and overhear them. Sean was many things, but stable was not one of them. They broke up 2 years before she died. I'm happy to have you, Abby and Essie, in my life. I'm not going to lie to you though. Mr. Y. Haniel is attractive, but I love my sisters far more than falling for some hot man. A hot man with a mansion, Emily retorted. Don't go all moral on me just to prove a point when we both know you want Mr. Haniel. Sex was not an integral part of her life. There'd been no time. Goosebumps dotted her arms and she quickly went through her own limited romantic history of one. Ernie had left her over a year ago before her mom died. He'd been her one and only so far. Sophie still leaned closer so no one might interrupt. We are in the middle of nowhere. Why would a man in the prime of his life cut himself off and live in isolation when he clearly has the means to be anywhere? Emily's eyes brightened at the intrigue. I don't know. Look, I'll check the house to see what I can find out about Mr. Haniel. He seems nice, but everyone has secrets, sis. We're not snooping, Sophie answered fast and her heart raced. Mr. Haniel is being super kind to us. I mean it, Emily. Emily sat back and pushed her hair off her shoulders. Then you'll have to ask him and get the answers yourself. She stood. I'm going to the library and then back to my room to read. At least I'll be entertained by some books. If I find you a bra, I'll send it over. She'd failed in this talk. Her mother would have handled this so much better. Sophie sat in her seat unmoving. We'll discuss this more later, Emily. Good luck, Sophie. Emily slid out of the room and closed the door behind her. Sophie stared at the empty plates on the dinner table. Perhaps she shouldn't go to dinner with Michael. Perhaps she shouldn't have kissed him. She was the biggest hypocrite in the world if she didn't live up to what she'd just told Emily. Tonight she'd find a way to live here with Mr. Sexy and not act on her impulses. It was the adult choice that she'd have to live with. Chapter 5. Sophie wore the exercise shirt that doubled as her bra today, and the gray yoga pants her sister had lent her as she stared at herself in the mirror. She was ready for the gym, not a meeting with Mr. Sexy. She tugged the exercise shirt down. It didn't help. I should cancel, she told her image, and it wasn't just because she had no clothes at all. A knock sounded at her door and she rolled her shoulders to release the tension as she walked over to answer. She opened the door to a gray-haired older woman with a grandmotherly smile who waved a dress in the air while wheeling a suitcase behind her. This must be Jack's wife. Sophie stared at the red fabric, stepped aside to let her in and asked with her hand on her heart. What is this? The older woman wheeled the bag behind her but left it near the vanity area, next to the walk-in closet, after she passed Sophie. Mr. Haniel said you could have his mother's things. While this, she draped the garment on the bed, wasn't his mother's, I thought you might want to look nice for tonight. The red dress sparkled and it wasn't cheap beads. Sophie stared at the low neckline and held her breath. If she wore that to meet Mr. Sexy, she'd advertise herself as available. However, she hadn't worn a dress that fancy since prom. Thank you, Mrs. Sophie stuttered as she didn't know Jack's last name. The woman reached out and brushed a worn hand against Sophie's arm, sending a calm, grandmother vibe. Bernadette is fine. Thank you, Bernadette. Sophie lifted the garment and clutched the dress to her body. Knee length, it seemed the right size. Without missing a beat, Bernadette set the suitcase to the side. Your winter clothes that you traveled in should be dry by this evening. If you want to take the children outside tomorrow, we have extra scarves and mittens. Her sisters would be thrilled. They'd bought winter jackets and hats in preparation for Maine, which was so different from Miami. They'd seen snow for the first time yesterday, but she'd been so busy setting up her sister's rooms so they wouldn't interfere with Michael that she'd left no time for outdoor fun. She smiled and nodded. Thanks. Bernadette lowered her head. Abby and Essie were in the kitchen helping me bake a cake. I hope you don't mind I gave them a few cupcakes as a reward. Her sisters finding their way to sweets didn't shock her at all, and it was probably good for them to enjoy their stay here. Sophie hung the red dress on a hook near the bathroom door as she said, No, that's great, Bernadette. If they didn't bother you? Bernadette turned to leave but glanced at her. They are welcome to help with my chores every day if they desire. I always like company. Good. Sophie turned her back on the dress. If she wore this, she'd be at a disadvantage of saying no, but she couldn't look away. I'll let them know. Good night, miss. Bernadette waited at the door. Surprised, Sophie walked over to Bernadette, offering her hand to shake. Sophie. Please call me Sophie. I'm not a billionaire or a millionaire. Neither was Mr. Haniel once. Bernadette tilted her head. Who knew his interest in computers and cars would pan out like they have? Both of those sounded like honest endeavors, and she felt her heart skip a beat. He earned his money through hard work and effort. Bernadette shrugged. You'll have to talk to him about his business, dear, but I've never met a more determined man. Determination is good. Sophie waved goodbye as Bernadette went down the hall. Once she was alone, she stared at the dress. The cherry red shimmered, and she knew if she wore it, she would feel sexy too, which wasn't conducive to resisting Michael. She ignored the dress and searched through the suitcase. Nothing called to her like that red dress. Jeans, button-down shirts, the assortment even looked like mom clothes. She turned back and the fabric seemed to glow. Her heart raced. If she wore that dress, Michael would kiss her again. Her lips tingled at the thought. Giving in, she decided that there was no harm in trying it on in the privacy of her own room. She tugged the yoga pants and exercise bra off as she headed into the bathroom to put the red dress on. As she zipped it up in the back, she felt it hug her waist and breasts. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a confident woman looking back. Wow, now she definitely wanted to wear this. The bathroom door opened and her sister leaned against the frame and whistled. Now that is a dress. You like it, Emily? Sophie turned and saw all of her sisters waiting for her. Emily motioned for her to come out. Sophie strutted as if wearing heels, and Essie and Emily clapped. Emily laughed and said, It's like the modern version of Pretty Woman and slightly sexier. Where did you get it, as you'd have never bought that on your own? Sophie ignored Emily's point and winked at Isabella. Bernadette, who enjoyed the younger girl's company today. Emily crossed her arms. Did they get in trouble? Sophie shook her head. Emily didn't need to worry. Bernadette had been sincere about liking their company. Mr. Sexy said they could stay here. Her heart stopped. She was the one who might mess up their invitation. Abigail's sweet smile brought her back. Sophie knelt down, hugged both her baby sisters and said no. She hopes you come and visit her again tomorrow. Sophie inhaled the clean baby girl scent her sister had while Abby held tight. She's nice, Sophie. Emily stood Sophie up and played with her hair, combing the side back behind her ears and pinning it. Sophie let her sister fuss, and her hair looked better as a result. It was still down, but one side pinned in a roll gave her a polished, sophisticated look. Once Emily was done, she gently shoved Sophie's shoulder and said, "Go sis, have fun on your date." "Okay, I love you all." Sophie slipped her feet into Emily's buckle black heels, which were the best shoes she could find. Abigail answered, "Love you too." Then Essie hugged her thigh. "Bye, Sophie." Even Emily gave her sister a quick hug. "Have fun." Sophie strolled out of her bedroom like she was confident. But once she made it to the stairs, she clutched her stomach. Mr. Sexy was downstairs and waiting for her. She'd never ever given in to physical temptation and intended to show her family that none of them needed a man in their lives. However, the zip in her pulse from the idea of seeing him made her entire body feel alive. She hesitated with her hand wrapped around the door handle of the dining room. Michael was on the other side of that door waiting for her. She took a deep breath and went inside. Michael closed his tablet and stood, wearing dark blue jeans and a short-sleeved midnight blue t-shirt where she spied a tattoo on his shoulder. Her heart hammered as she said, "Michael." His eyes opened in surprise, actually more like shock. She pressed her lips together as she wondered if this was his ex-wife's dress or something. She stepped forward as he asked, "What are you wearing?" The older woman had seemed so nice. She couldn't have set her up. Sophie's stomach twisted, but she looked down at her sparkly dress. "Bernadette gave this to me, is that not okay?" He came over and took her hand off her dress. She glanced at him as sparks raced up her arm. "It's fine, it looks better on you anyhow." Her gaze narrowed. Something had been wrong. "Why do you have this dress?" "It's too small for Bernadette." "Did you have a wife or girlfriend?" He held out a chair for her. "No wife, no girlfriend, please sit." She took the seat, and once she was in, he slipped in the seat next to her. Then he held up a wine bottle and she nodded. "Now I'm even more curious." He poured a French red wine. "I bought that as a gift for someone who will never step foot here, but it doesn't matter. I can get something else if necessary." The mystery became more curious. This couldn't have been for his mother, could it? She took the glass of wine he offered and said, "So, this was a gift to a girl you want to be your girlfriend?" He scoffed as if she'd said something sarcastic. She sipped the deep red with appreciation and read the label. "Cabernet Sauvignon." It was slightly sweeter than what she'd expected, Michael said. "My ex-fiancé actually. It was to be part of a plan." She almost choked on her sip, but she managed to keep it down. She swallowed and asked, "You were engaged?" He shrugged, drawing out the movement. "In another lifetime." She sipped her wine and mulled over what he'd said. She knew nothing about Michael Haniel really, but then he knew nothing about her either. There was only one way to remedy that. "Well, I've never been engaged." His eyes widened as he scooted his chair closer to her. "Why not?" The whole spinster thing was her future, not that she'd say that. Instead, she took a fortifying drink. "Never met the right guy, I guess. I don't want to get married or be engaged unless we're completely in love." He leaned closer, but his laugh caught in his lips. "Love is a myth we sell to the young, like Santa Claus." Whoever the ex was must have burned him, badly. She wasn't that jaded. That's depressing, but truthful. Michael sat back as Jack entered the dining room with salad plates. Neither one said anything else as the servant set the dishes before them. Once the door closed, Michael asked, "Did you enjoy yourself in my home today?" She picked up her fork and stared at her spinach and lettuce mix. "He didn't believe in love?" "Yes, you are kind." The rest of her sentence failed her. He reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm not kind. I've not been that in years, but I am hospitable." Fine dining. Their huge bedroom suites, near each other but separate. This mansion was bigger than her mother's old home, which was over 2,000 square feet. She toyed with her salad and listened to her heart that beat faster from his touch. He smelled better than any man in her memory. "In Miami, my sisters and I were crowded into my 2-bedroom condo." He released her hand, but it felt like his stare burned through her. "So you don't have much money?" "We had enough." She folded her hands in her lap, not ashamed of her circumstances. "I own the condo. When my sisters came to live with me, I made sure Abby and Essie had their own room and Emily shares with me. The rooms are large and it works for us. We ran because I trusted that the FBI would handle our protection. I remember." He leaned closer and traced her arm, leaving a warm trail of goosebumps in his path. "I want to make you an offer, and I was trying to figure out your position first." She scooted closer to him like a moth to the flame. Nothing could stop his pull on her. She kept her voice low. "Just ask me." He stood and came beside her seat, his hands tracing her shoulders now. Her breasts ached as he said, "Sophie, I want you far more than I should. I can make your life much easier and upgrade this condo of yours if you agree to a relationship that doesn't involve love." She glanced up and then stood. Her lips tingled for his kiss. He must have sensed her desire because his arms wrapped around her waist. Her eyes closed, and the moment his lips claimed hers, she was in heaven. Her arms wrapped around his neck, and she held on to him because it seemed they were one person, one soul. The zap she felt near him couldn't just be solitary. His hold on her waist made her think he felt it too. Slowly he ended the kiss and let her go. She was lost. She couldn't breathe or think. Finally, because he stared at her with heated intensity, she played with his shirt collar and asked, "I don't need a new condo. As for the relationship, can I think about it?" She'd have to figure out something to tell Emily. "I'm not going anywhere." The door opened and Jack stepped back, surprised. "Did you not like your salads? We're more interested in the main course." Michael held her chair for her again to sit. Tonight was different. Every cell in her body was alive. She needed to discover more about Michael. Perhaps if she did, she'd make a better decision because her mind was completely scattered. Chapter 6. Michael refilled her glass while Jack fixed their dinners in front of them. Sophie recognized chicken, mushroom, lardon and garlic cooked in burgundy wine. If she remembered the food channel right, this was coq au vin. Her stomach growled, and she hoped Michael didn't hear it. Jack left and closed the door behind him. Michael put his water goblet down and reached for her hand. "I hope I didn't make you uncomfortable earlier, Sophie. No matter what you choose, you're welcome here until we can get you on your way." Her gaze narrowed. "Interesting way of changing the facts. I can't go anywhere. Did you want to?" "Right now, I'm good." His palm was warm. She pushed her hair behind her ear, careful not to disturb the curl her sister had styled on one side. She let out a small sigh and said, "Thanks for that assurance, but that wasn't what I was thinking." He picked up his fork and stared at her with those dark eyes of his. "What were you thinking?" She watched as he swallowed a bite of chicken and his Adam's apple bobbed. She picked up her fork to avoid his gaze. "Your kiss really hit home." Again he reached out and brushed his hand on hers, igniting sparks. "Likewise, Sophie." She looked up at him. "Your kiss makes me forget myself. I haven't felt that in a long time." His words burned through her. She stayed silent while they both ate some of their meal. Once they were close to done, she dabbed at her mouth with her napkin and asked, "Why did you and your ex break up?" He almost choked, it seemed, but he wiped his lips with his own napkin, met her gaze and then said, "She chose someone with money instead of me." Now that was dumb of her. Sophie reached for her wine. He did the same and they clinked glasses. He then stared into the ruby depths and quietly said in his deep voice, "You didn't know me then. If anyone was the dumb one, it was me. I was the fool, but I won't be that, ever again." Mr. Sexy tugged a small piece of his dark hair like he'd pull it out, until he put his glass down and stared at her. Her skin ached for his touch. She nudged her wine glass away. "My last boyfriend and I just grew apart. We dated in high school and then college, and once all that finished we looked at each other and wondered what we had in common. It was amicable, though I was sad." Without a word, awareness grew inside her as he scooted closer. "If he didn't keep you and worship you, then he was the fool in that story." "Thanks, Michael, you're sweet." She looked up and wondered what would happen if she threw caution to the wind just once and kissed him. If she dared to make the bold move, the tingles in her lips begged her to follow the thought, but she stayed still. Michael leaned closer to her, and every part of her awakened. "Did you enjoy your meal?" His warm breath caressed her cheek, and her eyes fluttered closed. "It was delicious." "Why?" "Because I want you as my dessert." He lifted her chin and claimed another kiss. Zero to boil was the closest way to describe how he made her feel already. Sophie wanted to pull his shirt off and just as easily throw off her inhibitions. However, Emily's beliefs that women use sex to trap a man ran through her mind. She pushed him back. "Wait, my sisters are upstairs." He reached for her again. "So we won't let them see us. I am excellent at keeping secrets." For the second time she avoided the very touch she craved. "I bet you are." He pulled away and she took his hand. He had to understand that she wasn't rejecting him, the man. "My biggest issue is my sister Emily. She thinks, never mind, no." Breathing hard, he sat back and handed her wine glass to her, then picked up his own. "What were you going to say?" "Right." She sipped the sweet red that didn't hit the spot she truly wanted. She swallowed and then told him the truth. "She thinks women use their bodies to get men and get ahead." She's still mad at our mother for divorcing her dad, I think, but your offer makes me feel a bit of a hypocrite if I say yes. He cleared his throat and tightened his grip on the curve of the wine glass. I understand better. If I still had my little sister, I'd do whatever I could to show her right from wrong. What happened to your mother? Still, the past tense caught her attention. She came closer. What happened to your sister? He sat further away in his chair and looked at the table instead of her. She was murdered. I don't like to talk about it. Tears formed in her eyes. Murdered? She clutched his hand to her heart and squeezed. Oh my God, that's horrible. I'm so sorry. He reached out and petted her hair as a sad smile formed on his lips. You didn't do anything to be sorry about. What about your mother? With his hands still near her chest, she held him tight. With him it might be easier to share what had happened. She swallowed and met his stare. This time, with him close, the words flowed out of her mouth easier. She died in a car accident. She was overtired from working and veered off the road. He massaged her back a little and hugged her. Now that is sad with little ones at home. It was. Being responsible suddenly when she was only 22, about to be 23, meant she'd had to care for everyone else. She swallowed and let a few of her tears fall. Michael didn't seem to mind as he gathered her close and held her. The door opened and he pulled back. Jack coughed like he hadn't seen them hugging. Are you ready for dessert? Michael pushed his plate a little and nodded at Jack but kept her hand in his. Yes, and Jack, please tell Bernadette she outdid herself with dinner. Jack took their empty plates and kept his head down. She made your favorite cake for tonight and hopes you enjoy. Sophie had no idea what to do or say. Jack had clearly seen them. Her cheeks stung as his gaze scanned her and Michael's clasped hands, but Jack held his tongue. He took the plates out and returned a moment later with a white strawberry cream cake, her own personal favorite. He set the dessert down, placed their plates and silverware, and then left. She could breathe once he was gone, even though her heart still raced. Your servants are loyal to you. Michael cut the cake. She smacked her lips at the fresh strawberries inside, though she had no idea where in winter Bernadette even had such fresh fruit. The delicious concoction had been a treat as a child. Jack thinks I saved his life once. He offered her a plate that she gladly accepted. She picked up her fork. Did you? He put a plate in front of him. Technically, he edged his fork into the cake, but he's been more than loyal, which is something I value. What is something you want, Sophie? She ate a bite and almost choked on it. She coughed but swallowed the sweet morsel. Once she was sure her throat was clear, she asked, something I want? Something I can give you. He brought a strawberry to his lips. From Michael, all she wanted was to rekindle the desire he'd made her feel before cake. Talking and sharing was the greatest way to get to know one another, but now she felt him pull away. She scraped the last bit of strawberry from her plate. From you? I'd like for us to talk like we are now, every day. It doesn't have to be dinner. He set his silverware down. I've enjoyed our conversation, so for the next few months we'll talk about whatever you want over dinner. Afterwards, I'd like to strip you naked and have my way with you. A huge bubble of laughter escaped her lips. She wiped her lips to stop laughing. I can't be a hypocrite. He leaned closer and the smell of his testosterone mixed with a hint of evergreen sent her right over the edge, and all he'd done was pat her arm. You refused my offer of a new condo. Right now, it's two people who want nothing more than to enjoy each other. Her lips tingled and her body temperature heated as her heart raced. She lowered her lashes. I've taken advantage of your generous offer of your house and even your mother's clothes and given nothing in return. That's hospitality. He reached up and traced her face with his muscular hand. All I want is you, because you want me. You make me feel when I'm normally just a robot on the inside. There was nothing mechanical about Michael. Her lips parted. A hot robot. He stood and took her hand in his. Let's go to a secret room where your sisters will never find us. A secret room? Sophie wasn't actually surprised. She stayed rooted in her chair, uncertain, but then squeezed his hand. Tonight she'd make a choice she'd have to live with, but she couldn't imagine not being with Michael. She nodded. Lead the way. He kissed her cheek and led her out. This might be a deal with the devil and make her a huge hypocrite, or this might be fate. She didn't know yet, but the spark inside of her grew as she held his hand. How could it be wrong? Chapter 7. Michael brought her to a white panel next to a bookshelf in a study next to the library, and then pushed on the wall. It opened easily. Once inside the secret chamber, Sophie's eye was drawn to a huge mural of the dusky Italian countryside that covered the entire wall. Michael locked the door behind them. She turned and the white wall's hidden door seemed solid again, without any lines. The white daybed was pushed against the wall, and with a few books on the floor, she could tell this was used as a study room more than anything else. He then walked over and reached for the zipper of her dress. Her heart raced, but she nodded yes. The form-hugging fabric meant she hadn't needed a bra, so she held still while he slowly revealed her. His eyes darkened when he saw her white granny underwear that she'd taken from the bag that were cleaner than the cute beige cotton ones she'd worn on the ship. However, the heat in his gaze made her forget the heat in her face. "You're beautiful, Sophie." He dropped her dress to the ground and hugged her waist. She swallowed and reached for his blue t-shirt. Her heart thrummed and sent a warm thrill through her as she spied his muscles everywhere. On his shoulder was a cross tattoo. A shudder rushed through her as he unbuttoned his jeans and let them fall to the floor. He took her hands and led her to the bed near the mural. "Is this your secret lair?" "I think it was a bomb room, but I've used it as a place to rest during the day or night when I don't feel like climbing the stairs or being bothered by Jack and Bernadette." As she leaned lower, his lips caught hers and his kiss sparked something primal. Her hands ran through his hair and she held him tight. His fingers traced the bands of her underwear and her temperature soared from the brush of his touch. She swallowed and reached down to remove the last barrier of his cotton underwear. He did the same and she saw his huge erection. Ernie had been half Michael's size. Her heart raced with anticipation. "Wow, I'm already hard for you, Sophie." He kissed her again, claiming her mouth, her throat, her earlobe. He brushed against her breasts and the fire inside her grew even as she said, "You're bigger than Falth." "Nifai Rikaninji." She couldn't bring herself to say more. He winked at her as he shifted lower to play with her breasts. "I didn't know you were a virgin." "I'm not, but..." She stopped again. Her fever for him grew. He licked her breast. "Relax, this will be fun." Then he suckled the nipple and a rush burst through her. She hummed her enjoyment while he stimulated her to small convulsions. She thrashed her head on the pillow and tugged her hands through his hair. His fingers slipped inside her and a hazy dim surrounded her. "How's this, sweetheart?" "Mm-hmm." She kept her eyes closed. She wrapped her arms around his shoulders while she rode a wave of pleasure. His fingers left her, while he quickly rolled on protection, and then he pushed inside her, each movement bringing more joy. "You're tight," he rumbled. Her heart shattered and she surrendered to abandon. Michael set a steady pace as he reached for completion, leaning down to kiss her. "I won't share you." Lights surrounded her like she'd died and gone to heaven itself. Part of her completely shattered and all she could do was hold on to him. Oh God. Slowly she came back to consciousness. Michael's hands around her waist made her feel safe and protected. As he spooned her, his hard chest against her back, she imagined perfection. He must have felt her stirring because he whispered in her ear, "Sophie, are you comfortable?" The last thing she wanted was for their night of passion to end. She reached down and cupped his hands, holding them to her heart. "Don't let me go, Michael." He gently kissed her neck. "I can't, Sophie." His voice trailed off. Awareness grew and she turned in his arms to face him. His brown eyes were so expressive and beautiful. "What did you mean that you won't share me? There's no one else even here." His cheeks darkened in a blush. "It was a slip." "Slip," her mind added fast. She placed her hand on his heart to feel how hard it beat. "Did your fiancé cheat on you?" His face then went white and at first she didn't think he'd answer. Finally he nodded, but his arms tightened around her. "Yes, with my best friend." Sophie instantly hurt for him. She traced his strong torso and cupped his hard face. "You had horrible luck in the past with a woman who clearly didn't see you." He pulled her tighter and kissed her playfully. "You're sweet." A laugh burst out of her, but she held his shoulder. "My sisters wouldn't agree." For a few minutes neither one of them moved. His ember eyes fascinated her. He stared back at her, so he must see something inside her too. Slowly she let out a small sigh. Had she ever been so happy? He jumped out of bed fast. His chiseled bare behind fascinated her. She sat up, holding the sheet to her breasts as she watched him go into the closet to open a safe. He closed everything once he found whatever he'd searched for and came back to bed. He then handed her a white gold sapphire and diamond ring that had to be at least 5 carats. "Sophie, please think about what happens after you leave my house because I want to see you again." And again and again, her heart raced, but she held the ring for dear life as she met his stare. She wished she understood the gleam in his gaze. Was this supposed to be a marriage proposal? "That's months from now, how can you be sure?" He kissed her cheek. "I have something I must finish, but if I get to come back to you then life has purpose again." "Come back to her." It sounded like he was a government agent on a secret mission, but that was impossible. She tilted her head and cupped his face. That's sweet, Michael. His arm wrapped around her waist. That I'm not. Possessive, yes. His body sent her to places she'd never known, but her mind stayed sharp. She held the ring without putting it on and asked, "What is it that you have to do?" He lowered his head, pressing his forehead to hers. "It's best if you don't know." Her ears buzzed. Something was off with his answers. She swallowed. "Is it legal? Justice will be served." He sat straight to stare into her eyes. Cold rushed through her. Something was wrong. "Now that scares me. I don't want you hurt." He took her hand and cradled the ring in her palm, kissing her knuckles. "It's not important." He smiled and settled back against the headboard. "There is something else I want to talk about with you, don't worry." Suddenly she was in the tropics again, and it was just the two of them in the afterglow of passion. She nodded and tried to shrug off her questions. "Okay, sounds good. I don't like worrying." He winked at her, and without another word, he took the ring from her and knelt beside the bed. Her heart raced. He had meant marriage. Wow. She stared at him and asked, "What is this?" He held the sapphire and diamond toward her and met her gaze. "I told you. When I finish what I have to do, I want to come home to you. Marry me, Sophie." She tugged his hand up and he followed her directions, sitting on the bed again. "You hardly know me." He heaved a dramatic sigh that did terrific things to his chest muscles. "Then I'll ask you again tomorrow." "I do know you, Sophie. You have integrity, you have compassion, and you are strong." He turned, but she reached for his hand. He saw those things in her. "Wait, Michael, I promise to think about this. I won't leave the island without giving you an answer." Michael grinned and quickly slipped the white gold onto her finger. "Consider this a promise ring." She nodded, and his lips met hers with a deep and passionate kiss. Her hand felt heavy as she ran her fingers through the thick hair at his nape. She pulled back and stared at the ring that had to have cost more than her condo and looked at Michael. He realized that he was rich, but her dress had been intended for someone else. She swallowed. "Why do you have this? It's exquisite. Was this your fiancé's?" He winked at her. "No, it belonged to a former queen. She needed to hawk a few items and I bought the estate including her jewels. They are yours once you say yes. At least this hadn't been meant for another." Her heart stirred. She held him close. "Michael, this is too much. Thank you." Once again, his lips met hers, and she felt like chocolate that melted on a summer day. He tugged on the sheet that she'd bunched between them. "Now that was good, Sophie. You're making me hard." They'd agreed to see where a future between them might go. She understood better than most that there were no guarantees. She tugged his arm for him to follow. "Then come back to bed." "With pleasure." He threw the sheet on the floor. A throaty laugh escaped her as his 5 o'clock shadow tickled her skin. She traced his strong, muscular body with her fingers. For tonight and possibly forever, Michael was hers. Chapter 8. Sophie wondered if she should ask Bernadette or Jack about Michael's dark plan of revenge, or if she should just look around. Whatever Michael intended to do when they left here left a cold spot in her heart that she couldn't explain. For now, Sophie ran into her room and hoped her sisters didn't catch her in Michael's blue t-shirt or a pair of his underwear again. She tiptoed past Emily's room, ensuring she made no noise. However, as she opened the door, she saw Emily sitting in the library nook of Sophie's room, with her feet propped on the bookshelf as she read. Her sister put her book down and stood, though her gaze went straight to her hand. "Sophie, what's on your finger?" "Right." She held up her hand with the huge sapphire and diamond stones. "Michael asked me to marry him, so we could live here forever?" Emily walked over and picked up Sophie's hand to stare at the ring. "I've never seen one like this before." Former royalty hadn't lived in their neighborhood, so far as she knew. Sophie took her hand back. "I haven't said yes. This is a promise to consider it." Emily shook her head. "And he still gave you that ring, which is gorgeous." So far, Emily hadn't mentioned using her body at all, or the fact that Sophie had been gone all night. She relaxed her guard a little. "It is, and I promise to give him an answer before we leave. April is months away, so that we can both be sure. You work on a whole other level than Mom, sis. I give you credit." Emily stepped away. Sophie's smile cracked. Somehow she needed to convince her sister that love mattered, even if Michael initially just asked to buy her affections. He didn't love her, but something stirred inside her that their connection was deeper and in his heart. If she figured out how to reach the shattered remains of his heart, then they both had a chance to be in love. She lowered her head and her voice. "I'm not working anything, Emily." Emily shrugged and picked up her book from the table. "One dinner and a promise ring. Why are you waiting?" Attraction was one thing. She felt that deeply and had acted on it in a responsible way, but there were secrets surrounding Michael and his past. And she needed to know if he loved her. She twisted the white gold band. I don't know, something about Michael makes me wonder. Wonder what? Emily stopped to listen. Nothing. If she imagined a future for them, or if it was real and he could fall in love and she with him. Emily tucked her book to her chest. Sophie asked, "Can you watch Easy and Abby in the yard so they can play in the snow?" Emily hugged the book to her chest, her eyes wide with wonder. Snow, and you don't want to join us? Snow was a novelty only seen in movies for the Mira family from Miami. Snowball fights, snow angels, and catching a cold melting flake on her tongue all seemed magical to her too. Michael's ring felt tight around her finger, pulling her to find out more about him before she could say yes. Sophie shook her head. I will later. Right now I need to do something. Emily shrugged and walked to the door. Okay sis, see you soon. Sophie showered and changed into jeans and a navy blue flowered button-down shirt with rounded collars. She caught her reflection in the mirror and had to laugh. She was dressed like an older woman without fashion sense, but at least the outfit didn't hug or reveal every part of her. She glanced at the ring that seemed to have a halo around it as it made her dream of possibilities, but then she blinked and stared out the window where snow was still falling. She'd go outside with her siblings to play, but the buzz inside her veins begged her to check out the house a little. Slipping into the library, she sat at the desk where she had talked to Michael yesterday. She opened the top drawer and found pens and pencils with scraps of blank papers. Her heart raced. This looked completely normal and she shouldn't snoop. A shadow moved near the door and she glanced up to see Jack. Drat! Would he tell on her? She held her breath. Then he bowed and said, I thought you'd be out with your sisters. She grabbed a pen and paper and prayed Jack couldn't see in her heart. She placed them on the desk and said, I will later, but I needed to make a list of things we will need. I'll leave you to it. Jack left. She waited a few minutes and hoped no one else came to the door. She could feel her heart pound, but she tried to ignore the sense of urgency. She opened the top side drawer and found nothing but papers that she had no intention of reading. She closed the drawer and checked the bottom drawer. Inside this, she flipped more tossed papers but also found a picture. She picked it up and stared at a dark-haired woman, with dark eyes and curves that would make Sophie feel small and straight next to. She mumbled to herself, this must be his ex? Then she flipped it over and read the back, Mercedes Diaz. Pretty name. Sophie studied the woman one more time. Whatever she'd done, Michael still felt it in his soul. She put the picture where she'd found it and dug some more through the mess of papers, discovering a second photo. This one had a young, clean-cut, smiling Michael, probably age 18. He was on the beach standing next to a shorter, more brooding man. This must be his best friend. On the back, in the same handwriting, she read the name, Edmund Pierce. So the brooding shorter man must have slept with Mercedes, but none of that should haunt a man years later. She returned the photo, remembering that his sister had been murdered. If her mother had been killed, she'd want vengeance. Justice will be served. His words haunted her. Not the ex then, but revenge. Michael would go after criminals who had hurt his family. Now that made more sense. She put the picture away, relieved she'd seen them, and shook her head. Clearly jealousy had messed up her logical thinking. Whatever Michael intended had to do with his sister. She looked at the ring on her finger and smiled. As long as he didn't do anything criminal, maybe she could just say yes to Michael and relax. Outside, she heard her sister's blood-curdling screams. Ah! Adrenaline raced through her instantly as she jumped out of the chair and ran out of the library. Bernadette caught her in the hall and stopped her from running outside. Sophie! You must stay here. Essie and Abby were too small to care for themselves, and now she heard all three of her sisters' cries. They were scared. What's going on? She stepped closer to the door. Jack and the master are already outside getting them back. Just wait with me. Back? What happened? Who had taken them? Her mind couldn't even process harm coming to her sisters. She tried to sound calm, but took Bernadette's hand and squeezed. Please explain. Some men are on the island. They tried to kidnap your sisters. Her entire body stilled. They were her sisters. She was all they had. She swallowed and ran to the front door. Where are they? The doorknob turned, and Sophie stepped to the side, ready to attack whoever came inside. But then she saw it was Jack holding the little ones. Tears burst from her eyes as she reached out, picked up Abby, and hugged her while she went to her knees to hug Essie too. Bernadette said the obvious. Here are Abby and Essie now. Her sisters hugged her back and felt fine and alive. She'd have to check them all in more detail, but her mind sharpened. She met her sister's Esie's knowing gaze. Something else was off. Where's Emily? Bernadette talked to Jack, who then turned and went back out the front door. Bernadette locked the door. Esie quickly told her. They have Emily, but Michael and Jack saved us. They? The word had never sounded more scary. Bernadette offered her hand to Esie but met Sophie's gaze as she told both girls, Here, let me make you all hot chocolate. I'm sure Mr. Haniel will be back in a few minutes with your other sister. Abby's color returned to her face. He's getting Emily? Sophie stood and patted Bernadette's shoulder, her adrenaline racing with the need to get to Emily. Can Abby and Esie stay with you, Bernadette? Bernadette leaned closer and acted like she hugged Sophie, but spoke low so the girls didn't hear her. Do you know how to shoot a gun? Guns? Sophie choked out the word. Bernadette kept Sophie close and whispered, Yes. From what I understood, they were armed. Her hand covered her lips as Bernadette stepped back and gripped Esie's hand. Sophie shook her head. All of this had happened in 2 minutes? Poor Emily. Esie then piped in and said, Mr. Haniel is a sharpshooter. If anyone will get her before the boat leaves, it's him. Oh goodness, they all must have seen. Sophie was torn. If she watched the little ones, did she abandon Emily? Her heart felt cold, but Bernadette would watch her sisters. She stepped back. I have to help. Bernadette grabbed Sophie's jacket before she went out the front door. You'll cause more problems if you leave. She was about to say something, but Esie shouted and pointed out the window. Wait, Sophie, Emily is coming back. Sophie looked out the window and saw that Michael carried her sister in his arms. Was her sister hurt? Emily swung her leg as if trying to get down, but Michael kept a protective hold. Sophie prayed she was okay as she said, Michael has her. Oh, thank God. A few painful seconds later, the door unlocked and Jack held it open while Michael carried Emily into the house and let her down. Sophie hugged her sister. In under 5 minutes, her sisters had all been kidnapped and returned. Emily safe in her arms. What happened? Emily snorted and ended the hug. Michael killed the man who tried to get me on a ship. He saved me, Sophie. Her sister beamed at Michael in adoration. Sophie's stomach unknotted and she took Michael's hand. He squeezed as she said to Emily, I'm glad. Who were they? How had he killed a man? Would Emily be scarred by this? She would get her sister's therapy as soon as things settled. Sophie, Michael's deep voice caught her off guard, and a jolt of electricity rushed through her. I need to talk to you alone. Bernadette waved for Emily to join her. Come with us. I promised your sisters some sweets. I can get you the same or a cup of tea, whatever you want. Emily nodded. I could totally go for hot chocolate right now. Michael led Sophie to the library. When he closed the door, the echo reverberated inside her skull. He let her hand go and she crossed her arms, her skin prickling. Okay, who attacked my family? He took out a piece of paper and a picture of the 4 Mira sisters from a back pocket. Was your boss named Daniel Villefort? Her body tensed. This family photo had been in her condo, which meant the bad guys had gotten in. Yes. Was this, she gestured toward the door, because of me? He handed her the slip of paper that had prices next to their names. Yes, it seems our futures are entwined either way. Her spine felt rigid as she handed the proof of danger back. Testifying against her boss had clearly been the wrong choice. She should have quit her job and not put her faith in the FBI's protection. If she'd understood the consequences to her sisters, she'd have made different choices. She lowered her head, but Michael's words came back to her. Their futures were entwined? How? She glanced up and asked, why? Michael rubbed her arms. Because Daniel Villefort is the brother of Simon, the man I have unfinished business with. If the FBI doesn't arrest Daniel, I will ensure he'll never hurt you or your sisters. Michael wanted vengeance for his own reasons, but if he kept her sisters safe, then she had no right to judge. Family was all that she had that truly mattered in this world. She let her forehead rest on his shoulder. Was it really Daniel? Did you shoot him? Michael massaged her lower back. The man who had your sister is dead. His co-workers took him back on their ship as they ran off. But Jack found his price list and your photo in his back pocket. She didn't move but hugged his hips closer to her. Are you calling the police now? Perhaps their time would end sooner than expected. He kissed her forehead. No, Jack and I will handle anything that comes here. He then backed up but waited until she met his gaze. I have to go back out there and make sure the island is clear of danger. I want you and your sisters to stay inside for the rest of the day. Going outside wasn't on her agenda right now. She brushed the goosebumps on her arms but nodded. Not a problem, hurry home. He winked as he headed to the library door. I'll be back. You promised me dinner, remember? I did. She hurried toward him and kissed him. His arms wrapped around her and she let her hands curl against the soft hair at the back of his neck. She didn't want him to go. The kiss ended and he walked out of the library, down the hall. She watched his strong shoulders as he strutted in his jeans and black t-shirt without even trying to be hot. He just was. Inside she felt herself melting and glanced at the ring on her finger. She could say yes and marry him right now. He just proved himself capable of caring for them all. She heard the front door close and went in search of her sisters. Bernadette had walked toward the back of the house and the kitchen, so Sophie did too. Near a flight of stairs she heard her sister Abby's carefree laugh. She followed the sound and joined everyone in the huge state-of-the-art kitchen. Emily waved her over to a table and asked, "What did he say, Sophie?" Sophie kept her voice low to not alarm the little ones. "He's going back out to help Jack find clues right now, and we're to stay inside with the doors locked." Bernadette waved her over to the stove and the bowls her sisters were stirring as she asked Sophie, "Why don't all of you help me with baking tonight's dessert?" Bernadette offered her an apron and Sophie wrapped it around her waist. "Okay, Bernadette, thanks." Bernadette handed her a recipe for some rice dish and pointed her to a station where ingredients were lined up. "Remember, we need to act normal." They saw things children shouldn't. At least cooking a meal meant everyone was home and together. Sophie picked up the recipe and read step 1. Add water to rice. This she could handle, she nodded to herself. "Thank you, Bernadette. You have no idea how much your kindness means to me." Bernadette pressed some spice into her uncooked chicken and smiled warmly. "It's nothing at all." Cooking was good. It kept her mind clear of what might have happened to her sisters because of a choice she'd made. Michael had saved them. Again she felt her ring on her hand. If she married him, he'd protect her forever. Chapter 9. Sophie splashed water on her face to freshen up. It was already 8 o'clock and she wasn't ready to meet Michael for dinner. Dressed in the same jeans and flowered shirt from all day, she held the banister as she ran down the main steps and raced into the dining room, hoping he wouldn't mind the casual clothes. She entered in a hurry and Michael looked up, his gaze so hot a zap of electricity rushed in her veins. He'd changed his black t-shirt to a white one and his hair was damp, which meant he'd showered. He stood and held a chair for her. As she neared him, she breathed in his forest-scented cologne that mixed with his testosterone, and desire rushed through her. Sophie sat and Michael pushed her chair in for her. "How were your sisters?" She picked up her napkin while he joined her at the table. "I tucked Abby into bed and Emily sends her deepest thanks." "It was nothing." His cheeks darkened in a blush and his voice lowered when he put his napkin on his lap. "I did it for you." Her heart skipped. She picked up her fork and ate a few bites of her salad. The leafy vegetables crunched in her mouth, so she kept quiet until she finished. When Michael put his fork down as well, she reached over and asked, "How did you react that fast, Michael?" "I heard their screams, but you were already saving them." Jack came in and both stayed silent while he took their plates. Michael winked at her when Jack returned with the chicken cordon bleu she and her sisters had learned to make today. Once the plates were in front of them and Jack left, Michael picked up his fork. "I had 1 minute ahead of you as my alarm sounded. It was why we were able to retrieve the 2 little ones so fast. Jack and I moved the perimeter, so we'll have more warning, if there is a next time." The zap in her pulse sent adrenaline rushing through her veins. This could happen again and the danger was her fault. How come my sisters being out there didn't trigger the alarm? They didn't go past the gates to trigger anything. She shouldn't have trusted the FBI. They got away, so it's possible they'll come back. Stillness entered her body. Everything around her quieted. Not only had she put her family in danger, she'd put Michael and Jack and Bernadette in danger too. This was all her fault for not asking questions about her own safety. Her breath caught in her throat. Michael had no idea how bad she felt as he massaged her shoulder. Only if they communicate their failure, which they might not do. Hired guns like to work solo. If they fail, others will step in to take over their jobs. She still felt small and little and unbelievably stupid. She shifted in her seat, closer to him, and whispered, "I don't know what to do." His warm hand on her back and shoulder sent a jolt through her. "I've sworn to keep you safe and I mean it. You and your sisters will not be harmed while with me." But he was in danger because of her too. Her finger felt like it sparked and she glanced at her hand and the huge ring. She swallowed, met his gaze and felt the world shift again. "Can we talk about the ring instead?" He winked at her. "Sure." She turned her chair to face him, ignoring the food. "Michael, I just have one question. Will you do anything illegal once we all leave here?" His hand fell to her lap and she felt tingles of awareness as he said, No, everything I intend to do is above board. Good. She scooted closer and cupped his face. Then that's all I need to know. Michael, you saved us from my own problems today. His gaze grew colder and he stared at her with wide eyes. I don't want you to say yes because you want to thank me. I'm not. She shook her head as her heart beat faster. He took her hand off his cheek but held it near his heart. Then wait until you're sure. Something didn't add up. She stared at him and hoped the answer surfaced. He'd asked her, had he changed his mind about wanting to get married? Michael, her voice trailed off. She was unsure how to even phrase her question. He stood, still holding her hands. Sophie. Yes. She trembled as she rose too. He motioned with his face to their untouched dinner. Are you finished? Food could wait. She stepped into his arms. Yes. He held her tight and kissed her neck. Then let's go to my room. I want you, now and every night. Last night replayed in her mind and a thrill rushed through her veins as she tugged on his belt buckle. I don't know where your room is. Come. He placed his hand possessively on her lower back as he led her out. They walked away from the main stairs leading to her bedroom and went behind into an alcove. He brought her to an elevator and his hand brushed against her waist and chest while the doors closed. She arched to give him access to her body, even in her clothes. The elevator opened and he stopped though he took her hand to walk beside her. The hall was polished though the dark wood and from the windows on the ends, the moon gave the hall a glow that when combined with the deep green Persian runner sent a chilling sensation that ran through her veins. Once they made it to the end of the hall, he led her inside a door. Inside was a large chamber with vaulted ceilings, cream walls and a modern chandelier, couches and tables, cozy armchairs. Multiple doors or archways suggested private rooms, with this being the center. She turned toward Michael and asked, You have an entire wing and floor. What if he claimed her lips in a kiss, cutting her off? Her senses were at war because he heated her pulse, but the coldness was still inside her. She had caused their problems, not Michael. He shouldn't have to save her. Once he stepped back, he said, Jack is on security. He knows how to find me. Relax. You rid my mind. She joked and tried to relax her shoulders and body. He tugged on the top button of her shirt, unbuttoning it. I want to see you out of these jeans. They were your mother's jeans. She smiled as she unzipped them. His hands raked across her back and helped her lower the denim fabric. No wonder I want them gone. First she needed to talk. She took a deep breath and caught his hand that now traced her backside as her jeans fell to her ankles. She held his wrist and said, Michael. Her voice trailed off, unsure she had to say anything else. He leaned closer and her heart beat for him. You are everything I need, Sophie. She bit her lower lip gently and met his gaze as she swallowed. Can we talk a little? He motioned toward his couch. What else do you want to know? Once she sat without the jeans but still in her shirt and underwear, she crossed her legs Indian style on the sofa. What happened to your mother? He sat next to her, his face pale, and he didn't talk at all. He just stared at her. Finally he said in a low voice, She was also murdered, at the same time as my sister and father. Wow, he'd had truly horrible things happen to him in his past. Her hands went to her heart as she lowered her head. Were you there too? Did you see anything? The guttural sound in his throat made her glance at him before he said, No, I was in prison. Wait, prison? She reached out and took his hand. Of the two men on the island, Jack seemed like the guy who kept his head down. But Michael certainly didn't. Her heart raced as she thought about how or why. Michael squeezed her hand and despite the frantic rush in her pulse, she heard him clearly. For a crime I never committed. Instantly she calmed. Of course he hadn't. Michael's past made him who he was, but part of him was a good soul who seemed to be tortured about the existence of God, not committing felonies. What crime? His voice was flat and emotionless. Espionage and conspiracy against the government. Again her heart sped up, faster than a race car, as she rubbed his cheek and scooted on his lap to hold him tight. He'd been through so much that she'd never survive. Oh my God, that's serious. He traced her back and shoulders. It was a way to lock me in one of those prisons no one knows about. Anyone who knows me from my past will use that information to turn you against me. Of course, and if he hadn't told her, then she'd have freaked out. This time she met his gaze and saw how clear he stared at her. You were framed? With a small sigh, he nodded. It was a long time ago. Okay, his story started to make sense. The zap in her veins lessened to a dull roar. Is that where you met Jack? One eyebrow cocked. Why did you ask? Now it was her turn to explain. She shrugged. It's how he walks with his head down. I figured something happened to him, perhaps prison, but you don't do that. Although you have a chip on your shoulder that's weighing you down, you're perceptive." He held her tighter. She wrapped her arms around his neck. "Not really. I can't imagine anyone going to such lengths to hurt another, but then I didn't imagine my testimony at trial would send people after me either. I once trusted the wrong people too." He nodded, and then his lips met hers. Fire and heat instantly coursed through her. She wanted him right here, right now. Her hands tugged under his shirt. But there was a buzzer in the air and Jack's voice called out, "Mr. Haniel, we have company." He stood and held her steady while he fixed his shirt. He then walked to the door. "I have to go to Jack. Please stay here until I get back to my room and you." Sophie was tempted to run to her sisters and watch them while they slept in their beds. Perhaps she'd wake them and bring them all to a closet to hide in, but she met Michael's serious gaze. "Okay, just don't be too long or I'll have to check on my sisters. I need to protect them." Michael tied his boots, waiting near the door. "No one is getting inside my home, my sweet. Please be right." Perhaps it wasn't the best parting phrase, but her skin had a jolt of caution. She heard no footsteps in the hall. Looking around the vast room, Sophie realized that she couldn't stay here either. She had to ensure Abby and Essie and Emily were all safe. She tugged on her pants and ran down the hall as she prayed Michael made it back to her in one piece. Chapter 10. Sophie closed the door to Essie's room, who slept peacefully in her bed, and headed back into the hallway. Isabel was fine, but just in case something changed, she'd pace the hall. Next was Abby, then Emily's room. Her heart raced with the knowledge that Michael could be in danger. She swallowed, unsure what to do about that, and almost walked straight into Emily, who stood with her arms crossed. "Sophie, what's wrong?" The last thing she wanted was to frighten her sister. Sophie shook her head fast. "Nothing, I just needed to check on everyone." Sophie tried to go to Abby's door, but Emily stepped in front of her. "Don't lie, you're white as a ghost." She held still and met Emily's gaze. There was no way she'd tell her, so she motioned for the door again. "Just come and help me check on Abby." Emily kept her arms crossed, but they peeked their heads in. Her brown-haired little Abby was sleeping like an angel with her hair cascading on her pillow. Sophie popped her head out and gently closed the door to not make a sound. Emily grunted but stepped further back. Once they were in the hall, Emily stayed in front of her. "Okay, she's fine. Now tell me what's going on." Right, she had to tell Emily something, but being almost kidnapped today was enough for her to worry about. Sophie's mind raced. Emily had to guess something was wrong, and nothing would convince her to simply go to bed. So she let out a soft sigh and circled the truth. "I'm not sure. Jack came during dinner and needed to talk to Michael. I figured I'd make sure everyone's okay. Don't wake them for now." Emily held up her hand and showed her goosebumps on her arms. "Now I'm scared. Why would Jack interrupt your dinner unless it was important?" No, her sister didn't need to be frightened. No one was going to get to her again. They were after Sophie, and she'd sacrifice herself to save any of them if she needed to. This was all her fault anyhow. So she avoided Emily's knowing gaze and said, "Could be for anything. Don't stress, Emily. Finish reading your book." She rolled her eyes. "I can't. Let's go downstairs together and wait for Michael and Jack." There was no way Sophie could force her back into her bedroom, and they both knew that. Perhaps worldly Emily had seen too much. "Okay, but then you'll have to come up alone. I will finish dinner with Michael on the other side of the house." Emily walked beside her and bounced her in her step. "As long as I know we're safe, then I don't mind." This time they both took to the steps, and Sophie tried to control her walk to a normal pace. Without her sister, she'd have run at full throttle. As they made it to the first floor, Bernadette stood guard at the door. She rose from her chair and stared at both of them. "Why aren't you in your rooms, Emily? I thought you were reading." Hoping to convey that Emily didn't know the full truth, Sophie said, "I couldn't find a good book. Bernadette, will you let us know when they get back?" "Of course." Emily kept her arms crossed and asked Bernadette, "What do you know?" Her heart raced. Emily wasn't one to back down despite her earlier scare. Bernadette's face turned red. "Just that Jack and Mr. Haniel said to stay inside with the doors locked." Emily dropped her arms. "What happens if they don't come back and someone else comes to the door?" Bernadette walked them to a metal box near the entryway and opened it. It reminded Sophie of her fuse box at the condo, but instead kitchen lights or bathroom lights. The labels were assault weapons, front gate explosions, or artillery rifle. Bernadette patted Emily's shoulder. "The house has security measures. We're armed and don't need to be sharpshooters." "We are okay." Her heart leapt to her throat, but she lowered her hands. At least she'd keep her sisters safe inside. Isn't this type of home security illegal? Bernadette closed the cabinet but waved the key that she kept under her shirt. It was left over by the government when they used this house during World War II as a command post. But it still functions? Emily asked. When both of them stared at her, Emily added, "What? That was a long time ago." Sophie pressed her lips together, unsure how to explain any of this to her sister. Bernadette nodded, but then held her hand to her heart and pointed toward the front door window. "Absolutely, but it seems Mr. Haniel and my Jack are back, and they're alone. It's time for you to go to bed, young lady." The windows were probably bulletproof if Michael had all of the rest of the house armed. She let the thought go and turned toward her sister. "Fine, good night, sis." Emily nodded and walked up the stairs on her own. The door opened and the two men laughed about something as they entered. Sophie stilled and met Michael's gaze, whose eyes widened. "You're here," she swallowed. "I couldn't just wait in your room. What happened?" Michael took her hand in his and kissed it. "The ship returned." His chuckle deepened. "Jack and I ensured they won't come back again." Oh goodness, her sister wasn't the only one with goosebumps. She tried to breathe, but her small breaths didn't get a lot of air. "That sounds ominous." Michael let her hand go and motioned toward the door where they'd first really talked. "Actually, please join me in the library, Sophie. I had an idea on how we might help each other." Her ears perked as she walked ahead of him and opened the door, turning on the light. "Sounds interesting." He closed it behind him and motioned toward the desk. She walked but then stopped as they reached the area. "We're alone now, what are you thinking?" He took both of her hands in his and his gaze intensified. "Before I ask, I want you to know that I meant it when I asked you to marry me. I still want to come home to you." Was she so in love with Michael that she couldn't turn away? Her heart whispered yes, but her brain screamed no. So she lowered her lashes to avoid his gaze. "And I want to say yes. I just need for my heart to be sure." He squeezed her hand. "Fair enough, but I'm hoping your brain says yes faster, at least to my plan." Again the plan, and that was probably more important. Her gaze narrowed. "What do you mean?" He guided her to sit, but then he scooted the other chair over so he wasn't planning on taking the seat behind the desk this time. She sat and waited for him. Once they were both seated, he leaned forward, took her hands again and said, "It might be more prudent for you and I to return to Miami as an engaged couple. We'll lie a little about some wedding we're planning for next year and make the social rounds and be seen so the Villefort brothers come out in person." "I thought you got Daniel." "No, he'd hired men. Home, but she'd run." However, if Michael could keep her safe, then it would be best for her family to return to their normal life. There was a zip in her pulse as she asked, "And what would that accomplish?" He scooted even closer, letting their hands fall to her side. "They don't know who I truly am or what I intend. Plus, the FBI will be there to catch your problem while I keep you and your sisters safe." If she trusted anyone to do that, it was Michael, and his words burned through her brain. She leaned closer to him. "But you said you had unfinished business with Simon, Daniel Villefort's brother." He nodded, and his brown eyes seemed almost black as he said, "No one will connect Michael Haniel with the past." Something about his name made her blink. She released his grip with understanding. "Did you change your name?" He leaned forward, his forearms on his knees. "You are very perceptive." Her instincts had been right. She swallowed and let her brain put everything together. Then she crossed her arms. "No, it was the next logical question. What was your name at birth?" "No, what did your ex-fiancé call you?" His face went dark and he sat back, almost like he wanted the shadows to swallow him. She couldn't see his face for those seconds and wondered if he was going to jump out of his chair and leave. Instead, he took her hand. "Michael is my baptismal name that my parents chose for me. Haniel is my mother's maiden name." His identity was a lie. She stilled and asked, "And the name on your birth certificate?" His dark gaze blazed with some light she'd never seen and didn't understand fully, magnetizing her. "If I tell you, I need to trust you won't betray me and give this name to anyone." He'd been through so much. She brushed her hand on his face and leaned closer to him. "It's an act of faith then, when we've both been betrayed. I swear I won't tell a soul." He pressed his forehead to hers and held her hands near his heart. "For my plan to work, we'll need to trust each other." Yes, her heart wanted to trust him too. "It starts with your name." She could feel his heart beat wildly fast and she stayed still, clutching his hands. She trusted him with her life and her sister's lives, which said a lot. She waited and finally he said, "Dante Delegati, my parents were Italian." She kept her words soft, but she pulled her head back to stare directly into his eyes. Dante, I trust you. If you can keep my sisters safe and in no danger, I'll do whatever you need to help you. Then we're agreed. He helped her stand. Though call me Michael. It's what I identify myself as now. Perhaps she'd just made a deal with the devil, but her heart whispered that she hadn't. She trusted Michael to keep her safe, so she'd trust Dante Michael with the same. He hadn't changed. His past couldn't mean they had no future, and for once she wanted a future. If he found a way to end her fears and keep her safe, then she'd do her part, and all of this might not be a lie. It would be nice to think about a wedding. Anything was possible. Chapter 11. Sophie showered, changed, and found a plain blue woman's t-shirt that read "In Charge" and another pair of mom jeans lying in Michael's room for her. She changed and went downstairs. In the dining room she heard her siblings laughing, so she detoured inside. Her sisters all stopped talking immediately. Sophie felt them all watching her as she took a seat. Finally Emily asked, "Sophie, what's going on? Jack kept going outside and he's moving our luggage. Are we being kicked out?" Abby and Essie stared at her with apprehension in their huge eyes. Drat. Sophie picked up a piece of toast and smiled at them so no one freaked out. "Not at all. Michael has called for his yacht, that's all. We're leaving this afternoon." Emily shifted in her seat closer to Isabel. "Are we going to Kimberly's now?" "Good question." Sophie put some butter on her plate for toast and avoided eye contact as she said, "No, we're going home, well, to Miami anyway." Her sister's intakes of breath mixed with a scream. She glanced up and smiled at Abby and Essie to ensure everyone was good. "But we're going to stay at Michael's place there though." Abby smiled at her with confidence and Sophie felt like the sun beat down on them already. Good, at least one of them approved of the plan. Emily picked one foot up and knelt on it while at the dining room table. "Why can't we stay at our condo?" How to handle this delicately? This was not her usual, but she had to avoid sounding worried. She shrugged. "Not enough room and we need the police to investigate our old place." No one said anything. Isabel looked like holding her tongue was a chore. "Oh." Emily let out a loud sigh. "Well, it will be nice to be warm outside again, and I'm sure Michael's place is nice." Finally, Isabel lowered her head but spoke. "I don't like getting wet, Sophie." The small rowboat she'd dragged her sisters on had been a bad, desperate idea. No wonder her sister wasn't looking forward to another go. Sophie relaxed as she realized what was happening and she let her shoulders drop. "On Michael's yacht you can stay indoors the entire time we travel the ocean. There should be no ocean water inside the cabin." Isabel's face finally relaxed and she smiled again and picked up a muffin. "A cabin sounds nicer than Smithers' old boat." Sophie spread butter on her toast, then added a slice of cheddar cheese. "Agreed, so when we finish breakfast make sure that you haven't left anything here, all right?" She hadn't noticed that Jack had taken their luggage because Sophie had lost hers to the ocean. They all ate with renewed silence until Abby laughed at something Isabel whispered. Sophie wanted to ask what was so funny and swallowed her bite, but Emily asked, "Will we get our own rooms at Mr. Haniel's place too, or are we sharing again?" Sophie stared at her, unsure what to say. She shrugged. "I never asked him. But whatever happens we will make the best of it until this is over." Behind them Michael's deep voice boomed. "Everyone gets their own bedroom." She hadn't seen a door on the other side of the room, but then she hadn't explored too much. She stood as he came beside her. "Michael, I hadn't seen you." He placed his hand on Sophie's back, but he smiled and offered that cute wink of his at the two little ones. "Abby, Essie, I'm hoping you'll start calling me Michael as I intend to marry your sister." Isabel finished her muffin and pushed her plate back. "So you'd be our new big brother?" "Yes." He motioned for Sophie to sit and he took the seat next to her. Isabel shared a secret look with Abigail and then with Emily, but then Emily said, "Okay, Michael." "Okay." He nodded, like everything had been decided. He then picked up a muffin and borrowed part of Sophie's plate. He broke it apart and popped a morsel in his mouth. When he finished, he said to her sisters across the table, "When we get there, I want to buy all of you new dresses. Your sister and I are having an engagement party to tell people." Abigail giggled. Emily folded her hands and stared at them. "Well, this is serious and moving fast. Sophie, I'm glad you finally listened to me." Oh no. Emily's advice had been all wrong. She wrapped her arms around Michael's and patted his muscle. Her sister needed to believe that love was possible and she didn't need to use her body. "Emily, I love Michael. I know that it happened quickly, but I feel very deeply for him. I said yes because we love each other. Michael's arm twitched as she said the word, but he didn't say anything. Emily gazed at both of them like she was trying to figure them out. She then shrugged. If you say so, can I bring Wuthering Heights from your library with us? I want to finish it today if possible. Take any book you want, Michael nodded. Thanks. Emily jumped out of chair. I'm going to pack. Abigail and Isabel decided to follow her. Sophie stood as they neared the door. Her stomach flipped as she turned toward Michael and stared into his eyes. He smiled and motioned for her to sit while she said, Michael? He finished his muffin and then stood, taking her hand. Let them go, we have to talk. About? She followed him to the other end of the room. He opened the wall and led her down a path that reminded her of the scene in Phantom of the Opera, where the heroine is spellbound and determined to follow the phantom to his lair. She laughed and shook off the thought as Michael led her to the room with the Italian villa wall mural again. She sat on the bed and Michael tugged a chair from the wall and brought it in front of her. Then he sat and stared at her. While I am going to ensure Daniel Villefort is taken care of and not a threat to you, I have a second part of my plan that I don't want you involved in at all. Good, his plan. She leaned closer to him and massaged his thighs. Why? He sat straight, and his breath stilled. It's my problem and only I can solve it. Part of her wanted to forget asking and not create waves. However, she needed to know they had a future where he trusted her. So she inched closer to him but kept her voice low as she said, That's not an answer. I won't stop you, but I need to know what to avoid or who to avoid, and I must know you're safe. He covered his lips while he stared at her. For a second she wondered if he'd jump up and leave. His eyes were big and bright, but then he let his hand fall and took one of her hands in his. My family was murdered, Sophie. It was to silence them for asking too many questions about what happened to me. The prison guards showed me the video to drive me insane. Clearly her view of the justice system came from television and bad lessons in school. She shook her head, not believing how naive she was. They showed you the video of your parents' murder? Yes, he then squeezed her hand and leaned closer. I put together how it happened and went on my own, but the people involved need to be brought to justice. Right. All they had to defend themselves were their wits and abilities, and the truth was she'd never studied self-defense. Her heart beat faster. If you were imprisoned on false charges and showed a video like that, then I have no faith in our justice system. He kissed her knuckles. Here is the rub, I wasn't really arrested. He'd lied? She blinked but tried to calm her racing thoughts. You said you were in prison in one of those secret places the government hides people. He kissed her hand again, but his gaze never left hers. It wasn't run by the government, not really. My life was stolen from me by a man who thought he was rich and spoiled enough to get away with it. Wait, so all his suffering was because of one man? One rich man who thought the law worked for him? She felt her skin grow cold and clutched his fingers. So you think the FBI will be on our side? He nodded. If I give them airtight proof and use my own money and power to stop any more perversions of justice. Her breathing became normal as she understood that despite what had happened to him, he respected authority. The more she knew about Michael's past, the more questions popped up. How did you escape then if it wasn't a prison and wasn't run by actual authorities? With difficulty. His tone might win understatement of the year. He lowered her hand to his lap. And a deal made with the U.S. Army. So much information caused her brain to overflow with possibilities. She tugged his hand for him to sit next to her on the bed. When he did, she curled into his lap. Your life sounds horrible but also fascinating, me Dante. He massaged her back. I've been known as Michael for most of my adult life now. I told you last night. Please call me that. Okay. She wouldn't have to relearn his name and then tell her sisters later, if there was a later. Sophie glanced up at him. You were wonderful with my sisters today, but please explain in simple terms for me. You weren't really arrested or in prison. I thought I was in a federal prison and believed it for years. He caressed her back. Then he stopped moving as he looked straight ahead. I was kidnapped. My parents were killed because they went to the authorities and got too close to the truth. My baby sister. They had no way to protect themselves from evil. Her heart raced and Michael massaged her back again. I have every resource imaginable now. No one will harm you or your sisters, I swear it. She met his gaze as she turned closer to him and could feel his body heat mixed with her own. His expression seemed so solemn. She kissed his cheek. I wasn't worried about them, I was worried about you. His hand slipped under her t-shirt and warm goosebumps grew in his wake. "Sophie, we have a few hours before we go and nobody will disturb us here in our secret room." "Yes," he claimed her lips as his own in a kiss that sent her over the edge. Whatever else happened, she believed in Michael. As her hands clutched his neck and he pressed her on the bed, she knew in her heart she was already his. Now she just needed to show him that they had the future of her dreams. Chapter 12. Sophie showered with Michael and spent the next few hours with him, so when they left the secret room, the sun was already high in the sky. It was time to leave this island. Today they'd go home to Miami. Her nerves instantly shot up, despite the afterglow of pleasure she'd just experienced. Michael went to grab his bag and she was to go get her sisters. She insisted on going alone, but part of her looked backwards down the dimly lit hall. She wanted Michael still, right here next to her. But she made her way to the suite of rooms the siblings had inhabited, where Emily caught her in the hall. She brought her into the blue bedroom where both Abby and Essie were sitting at the table. Emily waited for Sophie to cross the threshold and then launched into question mode. "There you are. Where were you?" The last thing she'd tell Emily was the truth. They were safe and fine. So she met her sister's big baby blue eyes and asked, "Around the mansion, discovering new rooms. I don't have any luggage to pack, remember?" Emily pursed her lips and it was clear she didn't believe her, but she took the winter jackets from her bed and handed them to her sisters. "Well, Jack already took our stuff and told us to get our jackets." Sophie knelt down and zipped up Essie's jacket while Emily helped Abigail. Sophie brushed her hair behind ears and hugged Isabel, who smelled sweet. "Then let's get downstairs." Sophie grabbed her jacket from the bed and walked with her sisters down the flight of stairs for the last time. Once they saw Bernadette, they felt the house was powering down. Sophie glanced backwards as the lights went out. Essie tugged on her arm. Sophie continued down the stairs and told Bernadette, "Here we are. Can't wait till we're all warm and out of this dreary winter." Good. They were all going. Bernadette finished turning off the house power and closed the fuse box. Once she was done, she opened the door and waved. "See you on the ship." Michael walked over to the front porch immediately and held his hands open for her to hug. He then hugged Essie, Abby, and Emily. Emily's face turned bright red. Michael took Sophie's hand while he told them all, "No one is on the island, but it's cold, so let's stay indoors once we get on the yacht. Once we reach Boston in a few hours, my limo will take us to the airport, but we have to stop along the way and get every one of you something nice to wear. When we get to Miami, your photos will likely make it in the news." Emily popped her head forward and narrowed her gaze. "Why?" Michael squeezed her hand but turned toward her sister. "The case your sister testified in has been in the news. I want my new family looking their best and unafraid." Emily straightened her stance as they walked toward a yacht that was 10 times the size of the small rowboat they'd arrived in. "Where are we going to stop?" Michael waved for Emily to walk on the ship first as he said, "Newberry Street is best. I had Bernadette call ahead and make some appointments, but we have to stick together." Emily waited by the plank and held her hands open so that Abigail walked right to her. Without fear at all, Abby crossed the metal threshold. Emily stood and asked, "What kind of fashion are we shooting for? Casual chic? Trendy?" Sophie urged Isabel to go, but Izzy clung to her hand as Sophie answered the question. "Classy, Em. We're not getting in the paper for being at a nightclub. We have to look serious and strong." Emily pouted again but pointed her sister inside. Abigail went in without question. "Fine, Sophie. Whatever you say." Isabel whispered to Sophie, "I don't like boats." Sophie knelt down and quietly spoke so only Izzy heard. "Think about the pretty dress you'll get soon." Her sister made a face. "I don't like dresses." "Well, think about being warm when you go outside again." "True." Isabel was the reflective, analytical one, and in the same spirit her sister always had, she shook her head. "I liked the snow, it was so different." Sophie stood as Michael had no idea what they were whispering about. "But it will be nice to be home." Essie took a step forward and nodded. "And I get my own room. See, there is something to look forward to." Sophie kept her hand on her back while Essie held the handrails and hopped on the yacht. "I guess." Essie turned around to stare at Sophie and Michael. She then crossed her arms as she stood next to Emily. "Sophie, Michael, come here." Sophie joined them and motioned for her sisters to go inside. Emily went first and Essie followed while Michael joined her on the yacht and helped take the plank in. He said, "I'll join you in a minute. Why don't you go make sure your sisters are comfortable?" She kissed his cheek and nodded. Michael was such a gentleman, she thought. Inside, Bernadette had already set up a nice lunch spread. Abby and Essie had chosen sandwiches and found a table. Emily had her sandwich and a book at a different table, the book up signaling she wanted to read alone. Sophie grabbed her a turkey and cheese on wheat and water bottle but opted for the couch with a view of the bay. Nibbling the corner of bread, she watched the ship leave the small dock and head out to the ocean. What would Miami be like with Michael at her side? By the time he returned, she'd finished her sandwich. What's going on? He glanced around the room and saw her sisters were right where they were 20 minutes ago when he'd checked on them. Bernadette sat with her two youngest siblings. Is everyone settled in? Yes. Sophie accepted his offered hand and he led her out a narrow door to head downstairs. Inside the small room were bunk beds and a desk with a laptop. Michael motioned for her to sit. I want to show you something and point out a few people you'll need to avoid. He went to a video site and clicked play while Sophie tugged her seat next to him and asked, "What is this video?" He rubbed her shoulder as the video played, showing palm trees swinging in the background as music blasted. Some New Year's gala last year in Miami. They watched the revelers and about 60 seconds in, her gaze narrowed and she stared at Michael. He looks like Daniel Villefort, my boss. He nodded. Close. It's Simon, his brother. He's a federal prosecutor. Simon's activities might be why the FBI had been so keen for her testimony, but also why Daniel wasn't immediately arrested, leaving her family in danger. At least this made more sense to her now. That's a big deal. Here, go back. He moved the mouse to the 75-second mark and pointed toward a couple. She recognized the beautiful woman from the picture in Michael's desk dancing with the man who must have been his best friend once. And they are? His face was white, his voice without emotion. Mercedes Diaz and Edmund Pierce. If you see either of these people, I need you to leave immediately. Right. He hadn't told her who they were. She knew because she'd snooped. She massaged his arm and asked, "Who are they?" Michael's jaw tightened and it seemed like he didn't want to answer at all. Not your concern, but if you see them, just leave. They would need to work on trust. She scooted her chair so her knees brushed his thigh. Michael, I thought we agreed. Sophie, he cut off what she wanted to say and held her gaze, fire in the depths of his eyes. I told you at the beginning there was some things I needed to deal with on my own. True. She lowered her lashes, took a deep breath and said, You did, but then I need you to trust me. He patted her knee. They are dangerous. His protective nature was part of his attraction and she let out a soft sigh. She'd have to get through to him. I will stay away from them, I swear it. But I need to ask one question. Are they the ones who framed you? He hesitated but finally nodded. It was a start, she thought. Yes, and they are very dangerous for you to even know. So she'd been right when she found those pictures in the bottom drawer. She'd have to find a way to help him, but she cupped his face. Okay, and Michael? His skin grew warmer as his lips turned toward her fingers. Yeah? Her heart melted. If they made it through this week together, then she'd give herself to him forever. For now, she held his face and leaned closer. Earlier I said we were in love. I need for you to make sure Emily believes that. My mother didn't always make the best choices. He kissed her fingers. Don't worry about that. A knock sounded at the door and she dropped her hand. A second later, a familiar voice called out. Mr. Haniel, you can come in. Michael sat straighter and asked. Yes, Jack? Jack kept his voice low. Captain says we're being followed. I'm on my way. Michael jumped out of his chair but quickly glanced at her. Sophie, stay with your sisters in the galley and do whatever Bernadette says. Of course, she said while he rushed and joined Jack. Jack ran up the stairs. On the third step, Michael stopped and turned toward her. She tilted her head as he said, And Sophie? Yes? She moved closer to him. He held the banister like it would hold him together. The way he stared at her made her wonder what he'd say. She stilled and held her breath. They both knew they had no time right now. But his brown eyes grew even darker. I am in love with you. That won't be a lie on my end. It's why I asked you to marry me. That was the last thing she expected. She clenched her hands together and her heart hammered as her eyes watered. Oh, Michael, he winked and turned. I'll be back, Sophie, I promise. Hurry. A tear rushed down her cheek. Michael was in her heart, but she needed to trust him. Once she did that, then nothing would stop her from being with him forever. But whatever happened next mattered too, and she needed to protect her sisters. They mattered more than her own feelings. So she wiped the tear aside. Soon she'd have her answer on what she could do to help her family and Michael. Chapter 13. Sophie checked her hair in the small bathroom mirror. Isabel moaned with fear and Sophie darted out of the downstairs bunk to rush up the flight of stairs. She threw open the door and saw Abigail hugged Essie while Emily stared out the window at another ship in the far distance. Sophie passed the little ones, though she squeezed Isabel's shoulder gently. Emily turned, her face was white when she asked, "Sophie, what's that other ship?" Oh goodness, Emily must be afraid that it was the men who had almost kidnapped her. Sophie's skin felt alive and alert too as she looked. She swallowed and said, "Well, I don't know, but Michael went to find out. We're to stay indoors." "I'm scared," Emily said. Sophie hugged her sister and held her tight. Behind them, Essie's soft moan meant she felt the same as Emily. Sophie backed them up and pulled the two little ones in the hug as she said, "No more late-night movies about pirates for any of you." Isabel broke their group hug first. "Pirates and not the men from yesterday." Sophie shrugged as Emily fixed her face without looking behind her at the other ship. Bernadette walked in the door and nodded at the four of them. Sophie realized if they didn't do something, her sister's anxiety and her own would ratchet higher. So she went to the sideboard where there was a pile of games. She pulled out one box and said, "Honestly, I don't know what's happening outside. Let's play a board game. Michael will come and tell us if there is anything to worry about." Isabel shook her head at Sophie's suggestion and picked up a deck of cards instead. "Bernadette, do you want to play?" Bernadette joined them at the nearest table. "Sure, I'm good at cards." Isabel returned the box to Sophie and helped her sister Abby steady herself in her seat. Sophie realized she'd been outvoted, so she joined them at the table at the same time Emily did. Bernadette shuffled with one finger, holding the entire deck in her hands, like this was a magic trick instead of a deal. Isabel's eyes widened. "How did you deal like that?" Bernadette lowered her hand but shuffled more like a dealer in Vegas. "I was a professional. It's how I supported myself for years." Clearly she'd had an interesting life. Still did, working for Michael. Abigail asked, "Can you teach us a few tricks?" "Sure." Bernadette winked at her and then quietly said, like she was sharing a secret when she dealt cards, "Hold the cards like this so no one can see your hand, sweetie." Something dropped off their ship and splashed in the water beside them. Sophie's head jerked as she tried to make it out. "What was that?" A second after she'd finished her question, whatever was in the water made a huge splash, pushing water up in the air like a spout. Bernadette continued to shuffle and hand out cards. "Sounds like defensive maneuvers." "Don't worry, the captain is highly trained and one of the few private captains who's been in marine battles. Most of us don't have any memory of naval fights, not since World War II. The history lesson was enough to make Sophie sit down. She realized Bernadette had meant for them to be relaxed too. Emily put her hand down as she began to smile. "We're pulling away." Sophie needed to remember she was here for her sisters. She smiled at them. "See, I told you. This was nothing." Isabel aped Bernadette's hand gesture as she said, "I'm glad we found Michael and he'll be our brother." Her eyes widened as she asked Isabel, "You are?" "Yes, he saved us," Emily added. "He'll be great in our family." Sophie's head spun as she asked Emily, "So you're okay if I marry him?" "Yes." Isabel showed her card. "You better marry him." Abigail nodded in agreement. Isabel smiled as she said, "So basically if you don't marry him you're voted out of the family, Sophie." Wow. She hadn't expected that Michael had won over her entire family. She swallowed, played her round and realized she'd lost. Got it. Someone was at the door. All of them turned except Bernadette, who said, "Here he comes now. Let your sister go talk to him while we finish our game." She was losing anyhow. Emily laughed and held her stomach. True. Luckily they weren't playing for money. But Sophie stood and stared down at all of them. "Hey, not fair." Emily winked at Isabel as she said, "Sophie, you don't have a poker face and never did." Michael gestured to everyone at the table and asked, "Am I interrupting?" Sophie shook her head and walked toward him, kissing his cheek and taking his hand. "No. I lost. Let's go downstairs and chat." He waved as he said, "Have fun, ladies, and try not to let Bernadette win. She always gets smug." "She's teaching us to be like her." Isabel spoke fast. He opened the door they'd gone through earlier and placed his hand on Sophie's lower back and laughed back at her sisters. "Then I'm never playing with any of you. I'll always lose." He followed her down the flight of stairs to the room with the bunk beds. "Michael, what happened? Who was following us?" He closed the door and went down fully to the next level. Then he crossed his arms but kept his voice low so no one heard him but her. "The same ship that came to the island. I thought I'd gotten rid of them for good." They must have thought we'd be more vulnerable here, but don't worry, we're pulling into harbor soon. Cold crept up her spine as she mimicked his posture. That was fast. He reached out and massaged her arms, helping her tension dissipate, and then kissed her forehead. We're not rowing oars. Once we dock, we'll go shopping. A huge sigh left her in a release of tension, but she placed her hand on his chest and held him close. How do we know if we're followed? Michael massaged her back. Let me handle security. You handle keeping your sisters calm. Michael, I'm scared, she whispered near his lips as tingles formed, hoping for a kiss. Instead, he let her go and led her toward the computer. She assumed they'd watch the video again as he said, "Don't be. This port is nothing compared to Miami. Still, if you can choose your sister's clothes and slip Bernadette their sizes, she can enhance the wardrobe of my new family with a few phone calls. And make sure you get things for yourself." Good. The less in danger she felt, the better she could pretend to be secure in front of her sisters. She nodded. I'd prefer that. He motioned for her to sit where they'd been earlier. Shopping will be the easy part. Tomorrow evening you and I are throwing an engagement party at Plethor at Balthazar. I've already rented out the restaurant and ordered a menu. For that you need to wear something besides my mom's old clothes and keep your promise about Mercedes and Edmund. They are coming. He opened the computer screen and showed her a map of the restaurant and a menu. She clutched his arm. But you told me to leave if I met them. He swallowed, leaned closer and said, stay at my side and don't even go to the bathroom without me. Now that wasn't going to be an issue. She'd stay right next to him for as long as she could. She took a breath, nodded and closed her eyes. Okay, but only if you kiss me. Laughter burst from his mouth as he came closer. That's all you want? Her hands reached higher than his chest but clung to his neck as she kept her eyes closed. I'm scared for you and for my sisters. I can't let anything happen to you. My sisters just threatened to cut me out of the family if I don't marry you. He pulled back and stared at her, clearly shocked. Which sister said that? Isabel. She sucked in her lips as she opened her eyes. I'll be sure to get her a present, Michael said. Her loyalty is adorable. This time she laughed but said, and you still haven't kissed me. Sorry, my sweet. He wrapped his arms around her and kissed her. She forgot about the world and just focused on Michael. Everything had to be okay. She trusted him with her life, her family's life, and her body. Saying yes to him should be the easiest thing to say. He loved her and she felt that in her soul. Chapter 14. Thanks to planning ahead, Boston hadn't been an issue and the ride on the private jet allowed her sisters to check email, play on iPads and watch movies again. All of them had boxes of new clothes. Sophie relaxed next to Michael the entire time, though she was excited to wear her new blue knee-length dress that fit her perfectly. Right now though, she was happy in tailored gray pants and a simple black form-fitting shirt that hadn't been his mother's old clothes. Once the plane landed in the private airport in Hialeah, her sisters stuck together like glue but bounced as they walked onto the tarmac. Isabel and Abby never said a word about being home, but they held Sophie's hands. Emily stayed close, in her yellow and white cotton dress she picked out, but she turned toward Michael and asked, "Where is the press?" Sophie peeked around his shoulder and told her sister, "We're at a private airport. They'll have to keep their distance. Come, let's get to the limo." Emily persisted and asked Michael, "Where in Miami do you live?" He motioned for them to get in the limo as he answered, "Golden Beach." Emily ducked inside the vehicle but she pouted, "That's nowhere near my school." Isabel looked stricken as well, but she and Abby went inside. Sophie followed and said, "Emily, we'll figure it out, one step at a time." Emily's doubt was obvious, but she glanced out the window. "Okay, fair enough." Michael joined them and took the seat next to her. "In the meantime, I do have a limo service that can provide transportation and security for you, Emily." Emily turned back and smiled brightly. "See, that's a great start. Thanks, Michael." Isabel also relaxed, so she must have been worried about changing her elementary school, but hadn't said a word. Sophie patted her leg and smiled. The drive on the 806 to the Intracoastal became nicer once they turned on Collins and saw the ocean. She squeezed Michael's hand. Instead of relaxing, he seemed more tense. Minutes later, they pulled into an estate with a gate that was larger than a wall to a house and would block the view of anyone driving past. The black gate opened and they drove inside, hearing it close behind them. There were cameras embedded on top of the gate, securing them entirely from the highway. She looked forward and saw the beach, but then her breath caught in her throat. His mansion on the island was tall and reminiscent of the Gilded Age, while this white and beige home was modern. The huge bay windows must be hurricane-proof as they were in Florida, but they'd let in the spectacular unobstructed sunshine into the living area. The limo stopped at the front and Michael waved for them to get out. "Here we are." Emily bounced first, followed by Isabel and Abby. They must all be spellbound at the sleek modern mansion on the beach that was anything but cookie-cutter. Michael's hand went to her back to help her out of the limo. Bernadette should already be upstairs with lunch. Sophie turned and met his gaze. How? Did she take the express limo? Michael shrugged as they both stood taller. "Jack and Bernadette always beat me wherever we're going. They think it's part of their job description. Sophie, I want to show you where the party will be this evening so we can be prepared." The front door opened and Jack stood waiting for them as they entered a huge house with white marble floors and a chandelier that caught the light and made reflections that danced on the cream-colored wall. Michael caught her wrist to stop her from leaving the living area as Bernadette showed the others their rooms. Sophie whispered so only Michael heard her. "Will my sisters be okay?" Michael said. "Jack and Bernadette are here, just as I said. I'd like for us to go out for a while." Her sisters called out from the hallway. "Have fun, Sophie. Bye. Later." Clearly this had all been prearranged, she shrugged. "Okay, I'm all yours." He directed them toward the front door again and the limo. Sophie walked beside him, but as Michael held the door he eyed her backside with a whistle. "Almost," she laughed and headed back in the limo. At least her light gray pants and black travel shirt was cotton and breathable so the Miami humidity didn't get to her. They drove down Collins Avenue in the beach without saying much, but Sophie's stomach growled. She turned toward Michael. "I am a little hungry." He nodded, picked up the phone and said, "Then we'll stop for early dinner." With that he told the driver to stop, but she missed the name of the restaurant as she stared out the window. The rich billionaires from around the world frolicked on a beach area that was full of people very different than her own reality. A few minutes later, the limo stopped at a huge multi-level hotel that also housed a restaurant she could see from the window. She and Michael slipped out and he brought her inside. The staff immediately escorted them to a table without waiting. As they neared clear window, Sophie let the waiter hold her seat and she held her tongue until he left. But then she told Michael, "This restaurant is nice, I normally don't score the ocean view." He sipped the water that was left for them in crystal glasses. "I always do now." Arrogance made him a little sexy and besides he deserved the water view after being falsely imprisoned for years. The waiter returned with a wine list and Michael ordered a white. He then left and she perused the menu. "This all looks good, Michael." She decided on the fresh catch of the day by the time the waiter came back with their bottle. He took their orders and was gone. In his wake, coldness inched up her spine and she felt as if someone was watching her. Michael's gaze went above her head but he gave nothing away in his expression. Goosebumps grew on her arms as a man came around to the side of the table. She glanced up and for 1 second couldn't breathe. It looked like her old boss Daniel Villefort but she blinked and saw it wasn't him, not exactly. Sophie Mira? Was she going to be shot in the middle of a restaurant? She put her hand on her leg to stop it shaking. "Yes, may I help you?" The man crossed his arms. "You testified against my brother recently." She tugged her ear. Confirmation that this was Simon Villefort. She met Michael's gaze as she wasn't sure what to say, but then Michael stood to shake the man's hand. "My fiancé believes in doing the right thing." Simon shook his hand and she swore Michael's smile held a second meaning, like he was testing to see if he himself was recognized. "Yes, that I can understand." Michael placed his hand on the man's shoulder like they were old friends. "Look, Sophie means no harm to anyone innocent." She was relaying the truth as she saw it. Simon stepped back and stared at both of them. "Of course, it's hard to imagine my brother took a bribe and it's been shocking to our family. I shouldn't have interrupted your dinner. No hard feelings," Michael said, and she swore the gleam in his gaze showed he was playing around with the prosecutor. "Why don't you come to our engagement party later tonight and relax?" He handed him an invitation. She hadn't even seen the invitation but Simon read it and his eyes widened. "You're Michael Haniel?" "That is my name." Michael wore a small smile. Something about this whole situation amused him. Her heart beat so fast but she focused on his reactions. Hopefully he'd share whatever he found funny once this Simon left. Simon blinked and studied Michael very closely. "The investor and playboy billionaire?" Michael winked at Sophie fast. "Now that I'm marrying Sophie, I'm a one-woman man." Simon turned toward her again and his face held a slight blush. He stepped back away from their table and said, "Naturally, I'll talk to my wife." "Good evening, Mr. Haniel." Miss Mira. Michael sank into his chair and the waiter brought them their dinner. She unfolded her napkin while the table was set and waited for the waiter to leave. Once he did, she picked up her fork but said, "I thought you said he was coming already." Michael leaned across the table. "He didn't know you were the bride. His wife already accepted the invitation sent." The glee was clear now. The plan of his was in motion. She relaxed as she stared into the dark eyes that always calmed her. "Oh, Michael, how did you know they were here?" "I just told you I was hungry so this meeting couldn't be planned, or you were followed and Simon was the scout." Her heart almost stopped. He lowered his head but reached across the table to hold her hand. "If I'm right, in about 10 to 15 minutes the two I don't want you near will come in the door to check us out. They shouldn't come over to talk to us, but keep your guard up and if you need to use the restroom, now is a good time." "I'm good." Sophie took her hand back. She now had a time limit on when to finish her grilled chicken, so if she needed to leave she'd not be hungry. She ate a few bites. "You're sure?" Michael asked as he picked up his fork. She finished her bite, wiped her lips with her napkin and answered, "I won't leave your side, I promised." Then finished their meals with focus and forced casual conversation. Michael was deliberately slow with the wine. Once she'd eaten her fill, she sipped her wine too. It took all of her willpower not to turn around and look for them. Michael put his silverware down and offered to clink glasses with her. Then Michael leaned forward and told her, "Simon is likely talking to his brother on the phone discussing you." If this dinner was any indication of what the party would be tonight, she wished she could skip all of this and head home. However, she sipped her wine and asked, "He hasn't left? Does he know about the contract killers on the island?" Michael shook his head, "Probably not. Simon likes the pretense of not knowing his family's capabilities, but he will protect his own name with a ferocity that surpasses anyone else I've ever met." "I see." She swallowed a gulp. All of this was confusing. Michael kept his voice low. "It's his weakness. He and his brother will be arrested in the morning if my plan goes well, so tonight will be your last one with any threat." So Michael felt in control. Something in her gut warned that this was all wrong. She took a deep breath, raising and lowering her shoulders to calm down. She whispered, "How can you be sure?" He nodded and sat back in his chair, a confident man. "In the morning I need you to stay in the house, with Jack and Bernadette and your sisters. No one even goes to the beach until I return, but I should be home by 10, possibly 11. So she could lose the only man she'd ever cared about in the morning because he had some mysterious plan. Her skin buzzed. She'd have to help him and not just stay as he requested, though she said nothing except, "You promised to come home to me." His voice trailed off as he stared at something behind her again. She clung to her glass like it might protect her or shatter if anything happened, but Michael sounded calm when he said, "This is only part one, my sweet Sophie, but this will all end soon and tonight, we have our party." "Okay, Michael." Sophie's entire body was tight with tension. He motioned with his hand that it was time to leave. "And there they are. You can peek so you know who to avoid later." She put her glass down and stood, waving at him to join her. "Very well. We're done here anyhow, shall we go? You read my mind." He put his hand on her back and led her toward the exit. She glanced at the dark-haired woman in a green dress who stood next to the man from the picture. Mercedes was even more strikingly beautiful in person. Sophie felt plain and almost boyish in comparison to the woman's curves, but she kept her head straight and walked out with Michael. He'd chosen her to be at his side and she would never betray him. Tonight they would celebrate their engagement, and she needed to figure out how she could help Michael, because there was no way he'd go into danger on his own, not if she could help. Chapter 15. The restaurant Michael had chosen for their party had a view of the light blue ocean that would be spectacular when the sun actually set. The lights of Miami were behind them, illuminating the horizon, and the unencumbered no-condo view in Florida was rarer than a diamond. Sophie tried to imagine what her life would be like after her marriage to Michael. Once he'd had his vengeance, Michael rubbed her lower back. "Let's go. This is the venue." "We don't have time to go home and change," Sophie said as the thought raced through her mind. Golden Beach with traffic would be impossible right now. Michael smiled and led her across the street to a small boutique hotel. She held his hand and followed him to a room decorated with gold. She could see the restaurant from the huge window inside. Michael opened the closet and pointed to the wardrobe that read House of Morgan. There was even a shoebox. Clearly Bernadette had paid attention to every detail, as Michael said. "And there is your dress. You've thought of everything." She'd see the sunset too if all went well, but she lowered her head and asked, "My sisters aren't coming to the party?" Michael went to the desk that had a laptop, but he turned back toward her and shrugged. "Emily is old enough if you want to send for her, but I thought it better if the girls were safe at home." She'd spend her entire evening worrying about her sister if Emily came, though she missed having a celebration without her family. She shook her head. "No. I'd like them to stay safe." He opened the computer. "I've got staff from the salon coming to our room to help you prepare for tonight." He stood and walked into the closet to open a safe. She watched his back until he turned around with a jewelry box. "And I want you to wear the whole set tonight." Her heart was in her stomach as she opened the box he presented. Sapphires and diamonds larger than the jewelry in the movie Titanic sparkled. She fingered the necklace and wondered how he planned all of this all up. "These are all crown jewels? Did Jack drop off the jewels and help you set up?" "Yes." Someone knocked at the door. Michael answered, "Yes. You will look lovely." He left her side and opened the door, ushering in two women, both with travel cases. "Please hurry. We have a lot to accomplish tonight." The women set up a makeup and hair station in the room. Nervous Sophie walked into the closet to gather herself and spotted a dark gray suit behind the door. Michael appeared behind her. "Your suit is nice. Where to match with the tie?" His hand traced her back as he led her out of the closet. He stopped at the desk again. "I'm going to work on my laptop until you're ready." She glanced over and saw the word investment clearly labeled with the name Edmund Pierce. "Is that banking?" He shrugged and closed the monitor. "Yes, I'm an investor mostly these days, but these accounts are special." She stood on her tiptoes and whispered, "Because they read Edmund Pierce." He nodded, kissed her forehead and said, "He doesn't know the full extent of my holdings, not yet." Great. Her engagement party was a setup for disaster. Her skin heated. "Will he find out before or after our party?" He winked at her. "You are perceptive, Sophie." "After." The two women motioned that they were ready. Sophie left his side but said, "I'll be fast. Hopefully these ladies are too." She sat down and the dark-haired woman with dramatic makeup picked up a hairbrush and said, "Your fiancé is handsome, miss." "True." He was right there but didn't smile or anything to show that he'd heard the stylist. She realized she still held the jewelry. "Michael?" She motioned for him to take the box. "I think so too. Call me Sophie." Michael accepted it and walked back to his desk. "How did you meet him?" She met his gaze. Michael was a private person. She decided on what to share and laughed. "I knocked on his door actually." Miss Dramatic began to pin Sophie's hair in different layers. "Seriously?" She saw Michael's warning gaze in the mirror. The woman worked on one section of her hair. "It was raining, and I was lost. His light was on and I wanted to be dry. I had no idea that would lead to a wedding." There, she'd given no pertinent details. The hairdresser tapped her shoulder. "Well, that's romantic, to marry your hero." Yes, Michael was her hero. Sophie smiled as Michael lost interest in her makeup and focused on his plan. Once she was sprayed and her hair was done, the other woman took over. She airbrushed her, put lashes on her eyes and worked fast. Within moments, Sophie looked completely different and the chic gray and black traveling outfit seemed out of place. She stared at herself in shock but then smiled. "Thanks, are we done?" "Yes, good luck tonight." Michael, paying attention after all, stood and brought the jewelry back. The makeup lady and hairstylist stayed while he fastened her necklace. She put the earrings in her ear and turned to look up at gorgeous Michael. The dark gray suit fitted to his body. Beautiful. Michael handed the ladies generous tips, then escorted them out of the room. He closed the door with a wink. "You do realize everything you said to them will be repeated and possibly in the news." "I've never been to a hairdresser where small talk wasn't shared." She stood and ran her hands across his stomach as she passed and headed into the closet. "Which is why I kept most of our story to myself." Sophie glanced behind her and Michael was at her heels. "I figured it didn't snow in Miami and we didn't want her to guess we met out of town too. It would lead to more questions." Sophie turned her back to him to pick up her dress and change, but Michael held her and kissed the base of her neck. "You handled it beautifully, Sophie, just as you are my jewel." She stepped out of her cute pant outfit and picked up the dazzling white dress with hints of blue through the seams and he zipped her up again. She held still until he finished, though she glanced in the mirror in the corner of the closet and saw how the jewels really made a statement. The blue sapphire heart nestled at the dip in her throat. "And this necklace is stunning." He turned her around and claimed her lips in a quick kiss. Her heartbeat grew fast, but he let her go as tingles raced everywhere inside her. He fixed his blue tie. It's nothing compared to you. Sophie slipped on sapphire blue heels and accepted Michael's offered elbow. Michael, I don't want to live without you anymore. He guided her to the elevator and pressed the button. You won't have to. After I finish this plan, we can have every day. The doors opened, but she tugged his arm back. She couldn't lose him now that he had a huge hold on her heart. I'm scared. He hugged her waist and kissed her neck. Don't be. Think of tonight as a party meant for you. Right. If this was only an engagement party, she'd not want it ruined with setups and plans. She walked beside him and they crossed the street without incident. People already milled around the restaurant as the sun set. A few she recognized from the society pages. Peter Morgan and his wife, the movie stars Matthew Morgan and Jennifer Gonzalez, spoke in the center of the room. The Hawk family, where the father had been shot in the street for helping at a homeless shelter, seemed healthy and happy, surrounded by his family, including a royal European prince. Sophie never moved in these circles, ever. She clung to Michael's arm, but then she saw a few people she knew near the bar. Everything is beautiful. Her former co-workers walked over, in their more simple cocktail dresses, and Sophie hugged them all as they interrupted her and Michael. In between hugs, she said, "Oh wow, my old co-workers are here. Valentina, hi." The blonde with red streaks in her hair grinned and said, "Thanks for inviting us, Sophie. We were shocked to realize you were getting married so quickly." Sophie tugged Michael's arm. He studied each guest who came through the door after them and introduced him to Valentina. "This is Michael." He briefly gave them his full attention, smiled and shook Valentina's hand, but then a man came in and Michael motioned that he needed to go. Sophie nodded and let him. Valentina leaned closer like they were best friends. "No wonder you had the guts to stand up to Daniel in court. We were all petrified of the consequences. I had no idea you had a boyfriend, never mind one that was rich and could protect you." So her co-workers were clearly smarter than her. Her stomach clenched, but she smiled like she was completely calm and collected. "I'm lucky to have Michael." Valentina turned to watch Michael as he walked away. Sophie remembered how hard his muscles were, everywhere, when he touched her and blushed. Valentina laughed. "And smart enough to marry him." She sipped her champagne and gestured to 3 other girlfriends that had joined them. "We're going to go check out the single men." "Good luck, Sophie." Michael came back and brushed her shoulders to get her to turn. Tonight was supposed to be special. So why was her stomach knotted? "Is everything okay?" Michael asked. "Yes, I'm going to the bathroom to freshen up before more guests arrive." She stood on her tiptoes and kissed his cheek. "Hurry back." He hugged her one more time and let her go. Inside the ladies' room, she tried to breathe out the tension. Everything so far was amazing. Michael had thoughtfully invited friends from her work. Nothing was wrong. Right now, there were people she'd read about mingling at a party with her name on the invitation. Sure, her cousins had both married rich men, but that never affected her life. She rolled her shoulders and tried to relax, but the bathroom door opened and a dark-haired woman in a short red dress bounced in the room. "Mercedes." She washed her hands to hide their trembling beneath the stream of water. The woman stood next to her at the sink. Mercedes said, "Hello." "Hi." Sophie lowered her gaze as her heart pounded. She'd sworn to leave if they were alone. Mercedes smiled at her like a vulture. "Your Michael Haniel looks very familiar to me." Goodness, perhaps Mercedes would unmask Michael faster than he intended. Her skin felt electrified, but she picked up a soft cloth towel to dry her hands. "Oh, I have no idea." Mercedes didn't blink. "When did you meet Michael?" No information from her would reveal Michael's real name. She gave a casual shrug. "This year." Leaning over the sink, Mercedes touched up her red lipstick, then put the tube back in a slim red leather wallet. She took a card out and handed it to Sophie. "I see. Well, it was nice meeting you. Here's my number if you wish to talk or go shopping together." "Okay, thanks." "Good." Sophie tried to walk at a normal speed as she left the bathroom ahead of Mercedes. No knives went in her back, and soon she was elbow to elbow with Brandon Campbell, a Hollywood producer, and Eva Bishop, the newest movie actress, as they discussed Christmas in Paris this year. She walked past these socialites and found Michael, who was in conversation with Simon Villefort. He saw her and left the man's side, cupping her elbow to guide her to a quiet corner. "Michael, I just met Mercedes." "Where?" He held her but stared toward the door, clearly interested in who was coming inside. Sophie glanced up at his smooth chin, his tight jaw. She whispered, "In the bathroom. She believes you look familiar to her." He cupped her face with both hands and leaned lower, giving her his full attention. Relax, I promise nothing will happen, but stay with me the rest of the night. There was no need to cry or let her nerves race up her spine. Absolutely. His gaze narrowed above her head. She turned but stayed at his side, his arm tight around her waist. Mercedes and Edmund walked toward them. Edmund was at least 6 inches shorter than Michael. He had an easy confidence as he offered his hand to shake. Michael Haniel, thank you for inviting us both. We're pleased to meet you. She caught the glance Edmund gave Daniel Villefort behind Michael's head and froze. She couldn't breathe. He tried to kill her and her sisters. Michael rubbed her back and she snapped her attention to him. He leaned closer and said quietly, "Stay with me, trust me right now." Right. The plan. Michael promised tomorrow she'd be free. She took a deep breath and nodded. Michael shook his hand and said, "It's my pleasure to have Mr. and Mrs. Pierce at our engagement party. I'm hoping, Mr. Pierce, that you can set up a small shipment for me." Edmund slapped Michael's shoulder and nodded. Mercedes' face was white as she stared at Michael. Edmund then said, "Let's talk away from the ladies for a minute, Mr. Haniel." Her heart raced, but Michael kissed her cheek. "Be right back, Sophie. Don't go anywhere without me." "Of course, I'll be right here." She tried to smile but then turned toward Michael's ex. If Mercedes understood who Michael really was, did that ruin everything? Sophie hoped she could pull this off as she stared at the woman who had broken his heart and left him for dead years ago. Unlike Mercedes, Sophie would never betray someone she loved. Chapter 16. Sophie walked toward the banister that circled the dark dance floor while a band set up to play on the stage across from her. The sun had just gone down, but outside still had some of the sun's daytime glow. Soon everything would be dark. Mercedes stayed beside her, though she paused to accept champagne from a passing waiter. Michael is a blast from the past. I'm at a loss really how much he looks like the man I loved. Sophie took a glass as well, but she held it low, unable to drink. Her stomach churned as Mercedes' words burned down her throat. "You loved? How does my Michael seem like that to you?" Mercedes swallowed a sip and took a deep breath. Then she nodded and tried to smile, though her face was white. "It's his face, his actions, his expressions, though your Michael is harder than my Dante ever was." "Dante?" Sophie heard the squeak in her voice. She wasn't sure how to respond. It was obvious that Mercedes had cared. Hopefully Mercedes hadn't caught her slip. She and Mercedes focused on the group setting up on stage, along with most of the women at the party. "Yes, my childhood boyfriend," Mercedes said. "He was taken from me far too young." "How?" Sophie asked and lowered her head, unsure if she did anything else then Mercedes might catch on she knew more. Mercedes gripped her hand. "He was arrested and died in prison. I'm sorry to bring all of this up at your engagement party. I'm just at a loss." "Fair enough." She'd never loved and lost. Sophie patted Mercedes and, like she did with her sisters, tried to channel something comforting her mother might have said. "If we don't settle with our past, then it has the ability to haunt us, and it sounds like you were unable to put his memory to rest." Her mother would then say something personal to connect her wisdom. Sophie met the woman's troubled gaze. "Having both Daniel and Simon Villefort here after I just testified in federal court means the world is small." "Agreed." Mercedes stepped away. "Here comes your Michael. I'll leave you to your party." Good. Comforting a woman she didn't want to get to know or like had not been part of her engagement party plans. She turned and zeroed in on Michael's deep brown eyes. He leaned against the stairwell, motioned for her to join him. "Sophie." Sophie walked right into his open arms, exactly where she wanted to be, so she kissed his cheek and hugged him tight. His protective hold made her feel safe and warm. Then he took her hand and led her toward the back of the restaurant that overlooked the sunset and the ocean. The yellow sparkles of the remainder of the day made the ocean seem magical. However, the huge balloon with people milling around took up most of the night sky. She tugged on his arm. "What's going on, Michael? Why is there a hot air balloon?" He held her and they both waved to the guests who cheered them. "I hired it for entertainment. Guests can have a fun, unique time." She took a sip of the champagne finally from her flute and turned her attention back to the ocean. "I'm impressed." He then leaned closer to her so no one might hear him. "What did you and Mercedes discuss?" Of course, he'd been watching them. She took another sip, hoping the liquid gave her courage, but she looked into her glass as she said, "She mentioned you look like her dead love, Dante." Michael winced and accepted a glass of champagne from an attentive waiter. He drank deeply and stared out at the ocean. The consummate actress. He turned toward her and took her hand. "Sophie, don't stress yourself over my past. I don't want you ruined by their ploys." Now that was a strange word choice. Her eyebrows gathered. Why would I be ruined? He shrugged, sipped his champagne but then looked down at her. Hardened, like I was when you're so full of light and life. Part of what I love about you is that you can still trust Gandhi. If she truly trusted him, this party would be for just an engagement and she'd not have anything to stress about. However, she kept the thought to herself. I trust you because you're a good person, Michael. His fingers sent trembles through her from his simple touch. She looked up at him as he said, "See, that's exactly what I'm talking about." He then kissed her forehead and whispered, "Let's start saying goodbye to people." Her eyes widened. "But we just arrived." He pressed her toward the back wall and the door, giving them privacy. "I don't like being with people, especially ones I will never trust." His lips then met hers and her eyes fluttered closed. His kiss made everything better and she forgot where they were. All that mattered was Michael. A guitar strummed and the music echoed, signaling that the world had returned to normal. She took a deep breath and pushed off the door and wall while Michael moved to let her out. She nodded and checked that her hair was still in place. "Okay, let me say goodbye to my friends and I'll meet you at the bar." They entered the restaurant again and Axel Morgan was on stage setting up for a performance. In another life, she'd have stood in front of the stage all night and just stared at the man who'd been her favorite childhood star from the clubhouse to now. Her old friends were gathered on the dance floor, so she walked over to the group. As she didn't know anyone else at this party, she wanted to say goodbye to them. Then she'd run off with Michael. Home. "Valentina, how is the single scene?" Valentina wrapped her arm around Sophie's shoulders. "Sophie, you're inviting us to all your parties," she joked. "I've never seen so many movie stars in one place, and I just ran into Axel Morgan who's about to perform. I've been a fan of his since I was little." Every girl her age probably was. The clubhouse was on TV every week and he sang to them when they were little, just as he touched her heart with being one of the backup singers of his band now. "All of Indigo 5 are here, I'm in heaven." From the corner of her eye she saw Michael walk out of the main room with Mercedes. It was time to go. She untangled herself from Valentina and said, "I'm just happy with Michael, enjoy the fun." Valentina winked and took her drink back from Natalie, another friend and co-worker. "If you find another, please send him to me." Right. She'd been lucky to find Michael, hidden away on his island. She hugged them all and stepped back. "I have to go, but I hope you all have a great evening." Once she extricated herself from her friends, she walked to the lobby in front of the restaurant but didn't see either Michael or Mercedes. She mumbled to herself, "Michael, where are you?" She walked down the bathroom hallway and heard voices inside the ladies' room. She opened the door a little and glanced at the mirror. Her Michael kissed Mercedes. Her stomach trembled like a knife stabbed at her gut and tugged higher to ensure she was murdered. Right here, on the spot. But she stayed absolutely still. Mercedes stepped back, and Sophie stared at them through her small opening, unable to move as Mercedes said, "Dante, Villefort told me you were murdered in prison." Michael answered by shaking his head. "Did he?" Mercedes had tears in her eyes as she glanced at him. Oh God! This was it. Sophie saw that Michael was unmasked and he didn't really say anything, he couldn't. But she saw his spine stiffen. "Mrs. Pierce, please go back into the party." "No." Mercedes wiped her eyes and shook her head furiously. He took a paper towel and wiped his lips. "I'm only thinking of your marriage." That didn't sound like a man in love. The knife inside her gut stopped twisting. "I don't care." Mercedes grabbed his lapel. Michael glanced dismissively at Mercedes. "I don't know who Dante is." "Stop it." Mercedes massaged her temple. "Stop it." She then cried again as she asked, "What are you? A ghost sent to torture me?" Sophie's heart shattered and she realized she felt sorry for Mercedes too. She should close the door and give Michael privacy, but then Michael asked Mercedes, "This Dante, you loved him?" "Yes," Mercedes answered fast. Sophie peered through the opening. Michael leaned closer to Mercedes. "For how long?" "For all of my life." Mercedes brought trembling fingers to her mouth. Sophie watched like this was in a movie and not her life that was being sucked out like a vacuum. Michael spoke with harsh confidence. "And how long after he died did you marry Mr. Pierce?" Mercedes' face went white. "That's not fair." "It's time to go, Mrs. Pierce." Michael straightened his tie. Mercedes turned toward the door to leave. "You're right, you are too cold to be my Dante." Sophie jumped back and let the door close. However, she heard Michael's parting words. "There you are, Dante is dead." Sophie took off at full speed to the lobby, her heart racing. Mercedes was right behind her, but the woman didn't slow as she passed Sophie and went into the restaurant and the party. Michael followed at a sedate walk, as if nothing awful had just happened in the women's restroom. His gaze locked with hers, his hand went to her lower back and he kissed her cheek. Part of her wanted to scream, but instead she walked outside with him. Michael handed the valet his ticket and the young man hurried off to call for the limo. She couldn't keep quiet any longer and asked, "Michael, is everything okay?" "It's time to go, my love." Her heart stopped. If he loved her, then he'd not even look at another woman, including his ex. She averted her gaze. "You kissed her." He reached out and grabbed her wrist as the limo stopped in front of them. She turned toward him and Michael said, "She kissed me and I felt nothing for her." Nothing. Her heart whispered to believe him, but he had so much revenge in his heart that she ignored the inclination. Her gaze narrowed. "Are you sure?" He held open the door for her to get inside. More certain than ever, tomorrow my plan unfolds perfectly. If she ran off because of hurt pride, she'd abandon her sisters, along with her hopes for a future with Michael. She scooted inside the car and waited. Michael joined her and she couldn't ignore the jackhammer of her heart anymore. She lowered her gaze. "I'm scared for you, Michael." He whispered and held out his hand. "Then hold me tonight. I don't want to let you go." She crawled on his lap and let his arms help her feel protected and loved. If only she could believe her feelings. She placed her hand on his chest and then told him, "When I'm with you, I believe in the impossible. Please don't disappoint me." "Then I am truly blessed," he claimed her lips. She heard his slight moan and hoped that meant he felt something with her. The truth hit her hard. It was far too late for her. She loved Michael and she needed to help him even if it meant risking her neck. She couldn't let Michael's quest for revenge destroy a possible future for them. Chapter 17. Sophie woke up even though it was still dark outside, and the sun wasn't up yet. She turned toward the empty pillow in a panic, and realized that the sheets were still warm from Michael's imprint. She sat up, detecting footsteps in the bathroom. Not too late. She scooted off the bed as the door opened. Michael walked out in dark jeans and a white t-shirt that showed the tip of his cross tattoo. He walked over and ran his hand through her hair. "Sophie, I must go." "It's still early." She stood. Once he was gone, she would spend every second wondering what she might do to help him and bring him home. He kissed her forehead. "The earlier I go, the earlier I can return and we can start the rest of our lives." "Hurry." She closed her eyes. He kissed her and she forgot about everything else until he let her go. The second the door closed, she rushed into the bathroom and cleaned herself up. She grabbed a pair of jeans and a navy blue t-shirt that had no words and fit her perfectly. Michael was already gone when she came out, but she grabbed her pocketbook and dug out Mercedes' address. His ex was a part of his plan, so she'd go there first. Sophie called herself a car that would arrive in 2 minutes. Then she knocked on Emily's door and peeked her head inside. Her sister was lying on her bed, reading another book. "Emily, can you make sure neither you nor your sisters go out this morning, at least not until I get home?" Emily closed her book and sat up. "Where are you going and where's Michael?" The last thing she needed was a teenager who could get in trouble tagging along. There was already someone out to kill them and her family was safe, here. She stood taller. "He's gone already. I have to go help him." Emily shrugged and sank back in her bed, picking up her book. "Okay, not a problem. Have fun." Her phone beeped that the car had arrived. She closed the door and headed to the front door and saw a Toyota RAV4 outside the gate. She climbed into the car after double-checking that the license plate matched her phone app. The driver took off after programming Mercedes' address and Sophie's mind raced. She wasn't sure what she'd say to Mercedes or where Michael was exactly, but today she couldn't be afraid, not anymore. Her heart pumped but her body was full of adrenaline already. As they exited the highway, the driver casually said, "There isn't much going on in the Grove this early, ma'am. Miami in general was known for its nightlife, and the days at the beach. Mornings tended to be peaceful." She didn't blink. "I'm going to visit a friend." The driver continued down a small road. "I've dropped people off for extravagant evening parties at this address, but the last month has been quiet." "So, no parties recently. Had the couple been out of town, or worse?" Sophie remembered how Michael watched the Pierce's bank accounts on his computer. "Interesting. Well, thanks for bringing me here." The driver stopped in front of the house and let her out. She tipped him very well. The mansion was done in the Art Deco style with blue shutters just for show. The white exterior was so glossy she could see her reflection. She walked up the steps and rang the doorbell, hoping this wasn't a mistake. But how else to help Michael? Her nerves raced through her as she heard footsteps inside, and part of her wanted to run. However, as the doors were unlocked and then opened, Mercedes' eyes widened with surprise to see Sophie on her front step. "You and Michael left the party early last night. I looked everywhere to say goodbye. Now or never." Sophie's heart beat wildly, but she held the woman's gaze. "We had a lot to discuss. I saw you in the bathroom." Mercedes looked like she'd swallowed air. Even though she was dressed in a Kelly green day dress with full makeup, her face paled, but she opened her door in welcome. "Come inside. My husband is just leaving. Please give me 2 minutes." Hopefully Mercedes would think that Sophie had come over to fight with her, but there was no need to make a total scene. She bowed her head and walked over the threshold. Very well. Their house was modern with a taste for squares everywhere. The picture frames, the mirrors, the tiles on the floor. Edmund Pierce rushed down a flight of stairs that had no foundation and narrowed his gaze on her. "Miss Mira, it's nice to see you this morning. Mercedes, come say goodbye." Mercedes walked with her husband to the front door. Sophie strained to listen as Edmund whispered, "Keep her here. I'm off to meet Chris at the docks." On it. The docks? Michael was probably there too. She mentally prepared how to get away from Mercedes if she tried to force her to stay against her will. Anything less than a gun, Sophie would claw her way out if she had to, for Michael's sake. The door opened and closed while Sophie walked into the living room, assessing the area. She saw nothing to use as a weapon. Mercedes returned and sat on the couch, indicating Sophie should sit too. "So my husband is gone, we can talk now." "Right." She needed to appear angry about last night. Sophie sat in the chair closer to the door and possible escape and crossed her arms. "You kissed my Michael." A servant brought in 2 cups of tea and some sweet pastries. Mercedes set them both up with the plate in the middle. Mercedes took a small bite of a scone. "Is he really your Michael, or is he my Dante?" Sophie set a petite cranberry scone on her dish. "I don't know what you mean." Mercedes put her plate down, sat back, and crossed her arms. "My husband was always my backup choice. I'd have married Dante and stayed with the man I loved forever." Michael thought Mercedes was part of the conspiracy against him and his family. She finished her bite and swallowed. "Then why didn't you?" Mercedes dropped her arms to her side and closed her eyes, swept away on a dream. "Life interfered. He was arrested and I thought he died." Oh no! What if Mercedes was innocent and her planned life with Dante stolen? Sophie had no idea what she'd do if she was in the other woman's shoes. Mercedes straightened and picked up her tea. "Did Dante send you?" Sophie pressed her lips together but then also leaned closer for her delicate cup. Her heart was in her throat now, but she tried to sound calm and cool. "Michael doesn't know I'm here. I'm trying to figure out why you kissed him at my engagement party." Mercedes sipped her tea and stared quizzically at her. "The questions make it seem like you know more than you say, Miss Mira." Great. She dealt with women trying to get things out of her in the past. But Mercedes was better than most. Sophie sipped her tea. "Avoiding the question makes me think you kissed my fiancé for more reasons than the distant past." Neither one of them said anything else. Part of Sophie wanted to hear that Mercedes wanted Michael, so she understood the kiss, and another part hoped Michael was right about Mercedes being in on his plan. Sophie hoped this was all and that jealousy had only a slight tinge of responsibility for why she stayed. Footsteps echoed from upstairs and Mercedes stood. Sophie followed Mercedes to the hall, unsure of who else might be in the house. A teenage boy, the spitting image of Michael, walked to the bottom step. Sophie took a step back in surprise. Mercedes must have had Michael's son. No wonder she'd said it wasn't fair to Michael last night. He probably had no clue. Sophie stared at the boy and saw Michael. Mercedes motioned for her son to come closer. "Dane, hang on a minute. Sophie Mira, this is my son," and the name was close to Dante. Sophie saw no other possibility in her mind other than what she'd surmised. What did Edmund think of that? Dane kissed Mercedes' cheek. "Nice to meet you, Mom. I'm heading out now. Have fun at Jose's and good luck in the game." Dane winked. "Thanks." Sophie waited until she heard the door close and then retook her seat. "Your son looks like my Michael." Mercedes' face went red as she sat as well, and she looked at her teacup. "Everyone believes he looks like my husband, Edmund." Her husband was shorter and his face was square with a bigger nose. Even as teenagers in that photo Michael had, he'd been the hot one compared to the smaller boy. Sophie sipped her tea, pushing for answers. "I don't see how. Were you pregnant when you married Mrs. Pierce?" Mercedes' jaw clenched, and she put her tea down. "I was. Not that it matters, it was long ago." Sophie scooted her tea on the coffee table as well. She braced her body in case this went ugly fast, but she stood and smiled. I see. Well, I should be going. Mercedes also stood and blocked one way toward the door. Let me call you a car. The openness of the house made getting to the front door easy. Sophie backed up. It's unnecessary. I'm afraid I can't let you leave. Mercedes came toward her. Sophie's hands became fists in case she needed to fight, but she backed herself to the front door and swung it open. Sorry you'll disappoint your husband's orders, Mercedes, and next time keep your lips off my fiancé. In her run down the driveway, her words seemed meaningless, though Michael having a son changed things. She raced toward the ocean and an open restaurant that would have breakfast customers and a place for her to hide in plain sight. Her breaths came fast, but she took out her phone and ordered a car service and rushed inside the restaurant, where she immediately heard laughter and plate scraping and lots of conversations. Good. She pretended to look at a menu until her phone beeped and she went outside to get in her car. Rather than go home, she would find Michael at the docks. Getting away had been easier than she'd anticipated. Had Mercedes let her go? She relaxed in the back seat of a Nissan Altima that drove the short distance to the port. As they neared the security gate, the driver glanced at her and said, "You have no bags for a cruise, ma'am." Right, that was logical. She tried to appear calm as she formulated something to say that wouldn't be suspicious in front of guards. She sat straighter. "My husband is bringing them. I'm meeting him there." Very well. The driver and the guard exchanged a few more pleasantries and they passed through the gate. Huge cruise ships had passengers ready to board hours before the ships let people on, and others were milling around the offices that checked people onto their ships. Finally, they passed the cruises, and she spotted the merchandise ships and crates. She pulled on the door handle. "Here, let me out." The driver unlocked the doors and she jumped out. "Thanks." He drove off, eager for his next fare. Her skin prickled as she walked toward a merchant ship, her body alert. Somehow she could sense that Michael was close, but the ship seemed empty. She clutched her stomach, unsure what to do, as she wasn't about to trespass and risk being arrested. But then her muscles tensed and something cold and round was pressed against her neck. Her old boss said, "Sophie Mira, you just made killing you so much easier." Arms snaked around her waist and she was forced forward. She saw no way out of this. She had no defenses from a gun, and honestly this was all her own making. Michael had told her to stay home and she knew Daniel wanted to kill her. Thinking with her heart had brought her here. Chapter 18. The cold metal pressed against Sophie's neck sent tension throughout her body. She reached up and tugged on the muscular arm that held her as she said, "Daniel." Her former boss ran his other hand down her back and left a frozen tundra of skin in his path. "Glad you remembered the man whose life you ruined. I've wanted to kill you myself, but the FBI made that impossible. Then kill her for being an idiot and be done." She didn't say that, but instead tugged on his arm again. "Just leave my sisters alone." The gun pressed tighter into her throat while he laughed. "Once I finish with you, that teenage sister of yours will be a tasty treat." "No," she pulled at his arm with all her might. Her sisters were innocent. She yanked so hard she almost had his arm down. He used his other hand and tightened his grip, pointing the gun. "Try that again and you will be dead right here." No. She couldn't let anything happen to her sisters. She gasped for air. A gruff male voice called out, "Daniel, we have more important things. Bring the girl up here." Daniel lowered the gun. She took a deep breath, but it didn't help much as he said, "Seems you have a momentary reprieve, Sophie." As she was dragged onto the ship, her gaze caught sight of Michael. Two men held him and his hands were cuffed behind him. His eyes widened as he shouted, "Sophie!" Seaman, Daniel's brother, grabbed her arm and pointed for Daniel to hand her over. Daniel struggled for a moment with his brother but walked her over to Michael. Her hands were free for a second, but then she and Michael were both pushed into a small room. Seaman said, "So it seems I've relieved you of your money, Mr. Haniel. You and your fiancé can die together. We'll call it my engagement present." He bowed like this was a gift. "It was a pleasure doing business with you." The door slammed shut. She ran to the door but heard footsteps fading away as she banged on it. Without a word or a fight, Michael sat on a chair and reached for his shoe. She walked over to him, knelt down and unlaced his shoe. He grunted but continued to reach for his sock. Strange. She decided to check his sock and found a key. "Are you okay, Michael?" "Don't talk, Sophie. Not until we're sure they're gone." Without another word, he motioned for her to give him the key. She did and watched him release the cuffs around his wrists while his eyes turned almost black. Silence clung in the air now, but Michael broke it first. "Sophie." I told you to stay home. Now wasn't the time to be angry about that. She stood, brushed her knees free of dust and argued. We're trapped. I came to help. He stood from the chair and looked out the small port window. It was almost like he counted for patience. She did that sometimes when her sisters frustrated her. Her breaths became even. Michael turned toward her. Be calm. This was all part of my plan. Jack is getting my money first. Edmund is about to realize he's completely bankrupt, including what he thinks he just stole from me. All part of a plan? She sank in the seat he abandoned. She couldn't live like him, and not knowing what he planned meant she was the fool for believing him. She massaged her forehead. Why are you so hell-bent on revenge? What you're planning is destructive, Michael. He knelt down in front of her. Edmund, Simon, and Daniel all conspired to frame me and then murdered my family. I have tracked down every piece of evidence I could to put the picture together, but they were heartless with my parents and sister. Sophie, I can't move on until I avenge their deaths and ensure these men lose everything they ever loved. If this was true, part of her understood. She met his gaze. Daniel is getting away. Again, Michael shook his head and acted like he was in total control when to her mind, they were trapped. He'll go with his brother Simon to meet Edmund, and that's my next stop. She cupped his face. There was more, and she needed him to explain. I don't understand. What did they do? He shifted on his knees. Years ago I worked with Daniel. The fact he was embezzling money fits with his MO. The world really was small if that was true. Michael took her hand. He spoke about how he intended to steal from the owner, who I then told. I thought nothing of it until the night of my arrest and discovered that it was Simon who prosecuted me. The Villaforts clearly had no conscience. She leaned closer to him. How is Edmund involved? He paid them off. He released her hands and stood. Now was not the time for him to close off. She jumped out of her seat and tugged on his shoulder to get him to turn around. How? Why? His face was white, but he lowered his head and softened his voice. He and Simon worked together. Edmund paid to keep me imprisoned. She reached out and held his waist, like she wanted to hold him fully. Simon was the one that had me arrested, even if it was false. I pieced together that Edmund and the Villaforts had worked together to kill their fathers to get their inheritances. Silence filled the air, and for a moment she thought he was finished. But then his voice grew even quieter. I don't know why Edmund went after me. I thought he was my best friend since we were little. She hugged him. She had no answer for such a betrayal. She couldn't imagine it. But then she remembered her first stop and that boy she saw. Wouldn't that make a lover crazy? What if I told you that Mercedes had your son? Impossible. His arms held her close. She shook her head and glanced up at him. I've met him. He looks just like you. I'm positive a blood test would prove it easily. Michael traced Sophie's back and shoulders, making her feel wanted. She'd have never admitted it, even if it's true, and that couldn't be his reason. It makes no sense. She rested her head in his chest and listened to his own heartbeat. At least she understood now. Thank you for finally sharing. He lowered his head and kissed her forehead. The only other person who knows all of this now is Jack. She swallowed. She had no more doubts in her mind now. She glanced up into those dark orbs that hypnotized her every time. I came here to help because I love you. A small smile grew as he lowered his head. She closed her eyes and her lips parted, ready for his kiss, though he said, Then I cannot be mad at you, my sweet. I've wanted to hear you say that. After that he claimed her kiss and she forgot everything else. She held him and didn't let go. Every part of her body felt alive. She rested in his strong embrace. Michael, I can't just let you fight my battles and can't let you go after your own past without wanting to help you. He glanced down. You will never have to. Jack was right that you were my gift sent to me after years of sorrow. Heat rushed to her cheeks. Now was not the time to bestow goodness on her. She let him go and remembered they were trapped. She hugged her waist. I don't know about that. Right now, we need to focus. How do you plan to get out of here? He walked to the small window again and unscrewed a nail with the key he'd had in his sock. Once he finished, he pushed the glass out that she heard plop in the waters below. He turned and asked, Can you swim? Yes. He lifted her and she looked out. The drop into the ocean was at least 5 feet, but she held her nose and jumped. If this was Michael's plan, she'd have to follow through and not hold him back. A second later, her feet hit the cold water and she sank down before bobbing to the surface for air. The water had a slick sheen on it rather than being clear turquoise blue, probably oil or gas mixed in the ocean. Gross. She glanced up and waved. Michael joined her a moment later. She waited for him to bob up and then swam as fast as she could to the dock. Michael's strong strokes cleared the way and he helped her up a set of slippery stairs. Dripping, Michael waved to a car and pulled her along. "Here's Jack." They both hopped in the back seat and she picked up a towel and hand sanitizer. She cleaned her face and hands while Michael told Jack, "Please get Sophie home." She wiped her face but then met his gaze. "I'm finishing this with you, Michael." Michael took the towel from her and held his tongue. Near the gate out of the port he finally said, "Fine, but stay with Jack the entire time. I can't let you get hurt." At least he understood. She wasn't going anywhere. Her place was beside the man she loved and she'd help him. Working together was the only way they'd be truly happy. Chapter 19. Jack stopped the car at a house outside of Miami and halfway to the Florida Keys, well past the point of people living in nice neighborhoods. Michael ripped his shirt off and tugged another outfit on, handing her a t-shirt to change into that had seen better days. However, it smelled clean and wasn't soaked in ocean mixed with ship runoff. She used Michael's broad shoulders to cover herself while she changed. Once she was done, Michael kissed her forehead. "Stay here. You swore you'd stay with Jack." Now her heart beat wildly. He reached for the car door but she tugged on his arm. "Where are you going?" He turned back. "The Villa Forts are in a male spa, Sophie. Jack is coming in with the FBI in a few minutes." "Wait." She glanced at the estate again. It didn't seem like business, but Michael would know. She kissed him fast and held him tight. "Don't get hurt." He gave her that infamous wink of his and hopped out of the car. She sat in silence as he walked inside the house. Jack didn't offer conversation as he swiveled his gaze between the door Michael had just gone through and the road. Birds chirping became the only noise for a while. Tension built and she prayed Michael wouldn't be hurt. At last, multiple black cars arrived. This must be the FBI. She leaned forward in her seat. "Jack, let's get going." Jack turned and met her gaze. "So Mr. Haniel told you everything? Who knew for sure?" Michael was a man of eternal mystery, but she hoped this was all over today. She shrugged and unlocked her door. "I think so. Let's ensure the brothers aren't left out of the arrests. I'd rather marry Michael knowing we had a shot at living through the day." "Ah, miss." Jack walked out with her. "Stay with me then." Jack seemed to know a few of the officers as he maneuvered through the agents that moved toward the house. Suddenly Sophie's eyes settled on Agent Fleischer, a face she hadn't seen since the trial. His sneer was embedded on her brain as they approached. "We can't have witnesses working the case now," she winced. None of these men did anything to help her or her family after her testimony, so she shouldn't let anything he said hurt her. Jack motioned for Sophie to join them, so she ignored the sense of being small and walked forward as Jack placed his hand on her back. This witness wasn't protected properly and Daniel Villefort sent men to kill her. She has every right to be here now. Good. She lifted her chin. Jack clearly knew how to talk to the agents. Agent Fleischer clenched his jaw but nodded. "Stay out of our way." This was it. She was part of the team to help Michael. She walked inside and saw the video monitor and heard the audio tape. Michael was inside and in nothing but a white towel while he sat in a steam room. His hands were fisted in front of him while he leaned toward the heat source and said to Simon, "I know you killed your father. I know you sent Dante Delegati to a prison that wasn't actually a federal prison. Your brother then killed the Delegati family for asking too many questions and you knew and did nothing. And I know you were going to help your brother escape from his federal charges of embezzlement." Everything he'd said to her, her love had suffered so much. She covered her heart with her open palm. Simon stood next to his brother like he knew he was being watched. "How do you know any of these things? Do you think you're God or something?" Michael stood as well, showing his face like Simon should recognize him. "No, I'm Dante Delegati." Simon stepped back and visibly paled. "Impossible. Dante is dead." Sophie's heart raced as she stepped back. Michael confronted both Villaforts together and he acted like he was in complete control. He had no idea how horrible a gun to the neck felt. She was right back there and could feel the metal on her throat. Michael then leaned forward, cool as a cucumber as he spoke to Simon. "How could Dante be dead?" Simon leaned forward, like they were negotiating a deal. "I ordered his and his entire family's execution myself. They had no right to interfere with my brother or my current business." Goosebumps grew on Sophie's arm. None of this was good. At any second Michael could be hurt or worse. Any investor would see the risk in your company. Michael sat straight and had a cocky grin as he crossed his arms. "And you're right, Dante is dead. She held her breath as on cue, the FBI officers all rushed inside. She heard the stampede of footsteps as her mind processed what had just happened. She turned to Jack. Wait, did Simon just confess? Yes, the FBI has it on videotape? Jack asked Fleischer. The agent nodded and motioned for more of his men to go. Yes, these men are ours now. Jack brought her in the other direction. Michael came out of the locker room, in a clean pair of pants and FBI shirt. Before she said anything, he handed her a pair of shorts and another t-shirt. He looked great and smelled clean, but best of all was the way he stood as if he'd lost years of baggage. They hugged and she never wanted to let him go. He'd freed her today and stopped 2 of the 3 men who'd harmed his family. The Villaforts would never hurt them again. She kissed his cheek, but Michael glanced at Jack when he said, "Sophie, let's go." They walked to the car in silence, and he held her door open for her. She slipped in, and once the men took their seats, she asked, "Where to now?" Michael's hand rested on hers and he squeezed her fingers. "We're going to find Edmund before he learns what happened here." Jack stepped on the gas and the car raced back onto the street. Sophie held onto the passenger door. "So the FBI won't be involved there?" Michael patted her hand and motioned for the pair of shorts. "Other than wishing me dead, I've never found evidence of criminal activity with him. We don't have time. He'll run if he knows we're after him." She slipped off her pants and put the shorts on. At least the clothes were clean. Once they were home, she'd take a nice long shower and get the slick of chemicals out of her hair. Right now she needed to be with Michael. This last part was probably the most dangerous. He didn't have police backup waiting in the wings. He intended an old-fashioned fight as far as she could tell, because Michael had no weapons, and if the man were a part of his parents' death, there was no telling what his enemy might do. Chapter 20. Everything about the air seemed still and quiet as they drove onto an open farm at the edge of Homestead, Florida. Michael kissed Sophie briefly and stepped out of the car. Jack nodded at him, like they had this moment planned to the last detail, but she couldn't sit on the sidelines. Michael might need her here far more than anywhere else. She threw open the car door and followed Michael through the field. Jack drove away. They were alone. She stayed right behind him until they made it to an abandoned barn. She blinked and asked, "Michael?" He turned and his eyes widened. Then he motioned for her to join him and told her, "You should have stayed in the car. I never promised that, and I can't let you get hurt." She answered fast and her heart raced. He guided her inside a barn area where horses or animals would have been kept. He whispered, "Keep your head down." She followed directions for a second, but saw a dark-haired woman walking in the barn. Instead of crouching, she stood on her tiptoes and whispered, "It's Mercedes." Then her teenage gangly son, all arms and knees, followed her inside. This time Sophie's entire focus went to the boy's hands. He held a gun. Her heart felt like it stopped beating. She swallowed as Michael called out, "Mercedes." Mercedes then turned toward her son and said, "I'll handle Sophie and this man. You go and talk to your father." The boy ran, like he was off to get help. Mercedes completely ignored Sophie as she walked over to Michael and cupped his face. "Why are you doing this to us?" Sophie felt like she was in a bad soap opera when Michael took Mercedes' hands off his face. "Why did you betray me, Mercedes?" Tears went down the woman's face and she breathed like she had finally heard the truth for the first time in years. "You are my Dante. I knew it." A shot rang out. Sophie heard the split sound of wood shattering and the gunpowder and hit the ground, covering her head while still in the stall. Mercedes fell too, and Sophie realized the choking was the other woman and not Michael. Michael knelt down and held her head. Mercedes' chest had blood, but she clutched Michael's shoulder. "Edmund is trying to kill us all now. He thinks we ruined his life. I came here to warn you, and I didn't think our son would believe me. I need you to protect our boy. Edmund will kill him too. Don't speak." Michael pushed down on her wound with his hand to stop the bleeding. She coughed and said, "Dante, listen to me. I married Edmund because Dane needed a father. I made many mistakes. Protect our son." At least she had admitted it to Michael. The next shot came out of nowhere. No more words echoed in the barn. The quietness made her uncomfortable, but Sophie said as quietly as she could to get Michael to take action, "She's dead. Michael, take cover." Footsteps echoed again and Sophie cringed. The boy Dane rushed in and hugged his mother's body. Michael pressed his hand on the boy's shoulder, but the boy stood and screamed, "You killed my mother," as he drew his gun with shaky hands. Dane was the only one they saw with a gun, but Mercedes died asking them to protect the boy too. Edmund was nowhere to be seen, but he was the one that sent Michael to prison and killed his family. Sophie could see Michael's face as he shook his head, but then more footsteps echoed. A second later, all of her sisters rushed inside the barn. This wasn't good. Sophie stood and grabbed Isabel and Abigail into the stall, where there were short walls. Emily grabbed Dane and kissed him. Sophie's mouth dropped, but Emily's actions ended the potential fight between father and son, and she disarmed the boy, handing the gun to Michael. Once she was done, she said to Dane, "Michael did not kill your mother. He'd never do that." How her sisters were here was a mystery. Sophie clutched the two younger ones to her side and motioned for Emily to join her. However, another shot rang in the air. Emily jumped into the stall and on top of them. For a second, Sophie couldn't see, but she felt her two youngest sisters beside her and her sister on top of her. She pushed Emily off and checked the girls. Everyone was okay. Michael called out, "Sophie, stay down." Michael and Dane both stood and faced the door. Michael then pointed the gun at whoever was there as he said, "Enough, you killed Mercedes. You killed me once already. It's time to stop, Edmund." Oh goodness, Sophie couldn't breathe. Her sisters and Michael were all in danger. She hugged Abigail and Isabel closely. Emily signaled that Dane should join them. Sophie held her breath. It wasn't a good idea, but Dane stood next to Michael and asked, "Father, did you kill my mother?" "Yes, she betrayed me. She betrayed you too, son. You almost had me kill my real father." Dane stood next to Michael. "You and your mother were always a disappointment," Edmund's voice called out. But then he asked, "Who are you?" "Dante Delegati." Michael gently nudged Dane closer to her. Emily reached out and pulled the boy into their stall. Edmund laughed. "Seems my wife was right for once. You are back from the dead." Michael ran toward the door. Dane acted like he'd follow, but Sophie heard a fight. Her pulse quickened and she hugged her sisters to protect them. But she let go and managed to stand and look over the stall as Michael pummeled Edmund and the gun fell to the side. "Why Edmund?" Edmund spit at him. "Why what? Why did I hate you and marry Mercedes?" Sophie flinched and she closed her eyes for a second. Michael's pained one word, "yes," screwed into her heart like an electric drill. She opened her eyes, witnessing his pale face. Edmund punched him with his fists and words, "Because you're no one, Dante. I wasn't supposed to be jealous of a boy who couldn't buy a car. A kid happy with a cheap toy boat from his dad when I could have anything I wanted." Michael held back his fists, but his lips thinned. "I don't understand." Edmund pushed Michael down to the ground and grabbed for the gun. Michael rolled and reached for the same gun. Sophie saw the crazed look in the man's gaze and she knew he saw her too. She pushed her sisters down without seeming to move. Edmund pointed his gun at her, at Dane, and at Michael. "You wouldn't. It's time for this to end. Who should I kill first, Dante?" Michael stepped in front of Edmund, blocking her view. "Let the children get out of here, including your son." Sophie glanced down and saw Emily crunched over Abigail and tears pooling in Isabel's eyes. Right now she needed to protect them. She dropped to the ground and hugged her sisters. If there was a way out of the stall, she'd have grabbed them and run. But her heart beat wildly. They were trapped and escape was an illusion that haunted her thoughts like a hopeless wish. If Michael lost, they were all dead now. Dane stood at the edge of the stall without crouching, like he too would protect them even though the body of his mother was right beside him. Edmund cried out, "He's not my son, he never was. Perhaps I should start with him as his eyes have bothered me for 14 years. Michael shouted, "No!" A gun went off. Sophie saw Dane flinch, but he continued to stand. Then Dane took off and ran toward the front door to join the men. No other sounds followed at first. The silence was deafening. She held Essie tight until she felt Isabel struggle. She let her sister go, but motioned for silence. Isabel nodded as Sophie stood to look over the rail. Michael and Edmund were both lying on the ground and Dane kicked the gun away. He then leaned over both of them with tears in his eyes. Her heart pounded in her chest, pounded like a hammer to the wall when it beats. Her skin was electrified and she took off in a run toward Michael. If Michael died, she'd be lost. She threw herself to her knees next to him and tried to feel for a pulse, a heartbeat, a breath while she screamed, "Michael!" He didn't move, but his chest released air. A tear came out of her. He was still alive. She searched his chest for signs of blood but saw none. The hammering inside her heart quieted to a dull thud while she shook his arm. "Michael, are you all right?" Emily called from behind her. "Sophie, is Michael okay?" She turned and saw how white her sisters' faces were. She glanced at Edmund, whose chest was bleeding. Michael had stopped the crazed man. She then motioned for her sisters to join her while she nodded. I think so, Michael coughed and whispered. How is Dane? He's fine. Sophie glanced at the teenager. Isabel took his hand and he joined them. Sophie shook Michael's shoulder again and said louder. Do you hear that, Michael? Your son is alive. You're free, finally. Again he coughed, but this time he sat up. She supported him, her hands on his back. Abigail cheered. Sophie's face heated. Her skin felt tight and alive, like when butterflies are first born and leave the nest. Michael opened his eyes and stared at her. I get to come home to you now, Sophie, if you'll have me. Thank God you're okay. She wrapped her arms around his neck. Everyone she loved was alive. Like Velcro that found its match, she'd found her true home. Chapter 21. Sophie's eyes fluttered open as the morning light wafted through the room, and the prisms of the crystal chandelier made the light dance on the wall across from them. She sighed and turned into Michael, who slept soundly next to her. Even in his sleep, Michael's warmth and strength sent a thrill through her. His stretch made the bed shift, but she sat and watched the waves lap on shore. Michael's hand massaged her back and she turned toward him. He winked at her with that sexy smile of his. Sophie, I'm glad you came to Miami with me. I couldn't let the man I love get hurt. She crossed her legs and looked down at him with his head still on the pillow. He stretched and sat in front of her. He then took her hand and smiled. I love you, and I need your help. I'm not sure how to talk to Dane. I'm at a loss. Outside the window, she heard her sisters laugh. They turned and saw all three of the girls heading toward the ocean with Bernadette. Dane followed behind them in a red pair of swim trunks that went to his knees. Sophie brushed Michael's arm for his attention and said, My sisters adopted him like a brother already. Give it time. He squeezed her knee. It's the one thing I now have. All my life I've been planning vengeance. If you weren't here, I'd be totally lost. Her heart beamed like the sun outside and her skin became softer somehow. Loving Michael happened so fast, but she couldn't imagine her life without him now. She sucked on her bottom lip as she debated with herself. She needed to tell him. She swallowed and said, I'd like to talk about our engagement party. He moved a little to give her room. We don't have to get married right away, Sophie. You can do all the wedding planning or none. I won't force you. She reached out and grabbed his hand. His eyes widened, but she scooted closer. I want you involved, Michael. Involved? His gaze narrowed. What do you mean? She curled her fingers around his while she said, I'd like for that party to be real. For our engagement to be real. For this ring to mean what you said. And for our wedding to be at the Spanish monastery. He kissed her forehead and his arms wrapped around her, pulling her close. The venue only holds 100 people for dinner. A laugh bubbled through her throat and came out louder than she thought. She hugged him but said, Then you'll have to be selective with your half. Sounds good. This time he claimed her mouth with a kiss. Her lips tingled as if he'd branded her for life already. However, her stomach growled. Last night she'd not eaten enough, opting for a long shower before bed instead of snacks. She let him go, stood and grabbed a robe. And for now, can we go spend more time back on the island? I kind of miss where we were totally alone. He tugged on blue pajama pants that tied in the front. What about the children in school? Good question. She raised her eyebrow. Can you handle adding a few tutors? We'll have to pay well since they won't get to go home much. This time he laughed, and the belly laugh of his made her insides go all mushy and soft. Your sisters can all go to Harvard and it won't hurt my bank account. Sophie, I just want you to be my wife. She walked to the door and smelled fresh bread that must have just finished baking. The entire beachside mansion had that fresh dough smell. Then let's do it. They left the bedroom for the kitchen. Her sister Emily screamed. Sophie! Her heart stopped. They were at the beach with Bernadette. Had something happened to Abigail or Isabel? She ran to the door where his sisters rushed inside like a herd of wild horses and asked her sister, What is it? Emily hugged the book she had to her chest, but shrugged. We have visitors. Thankfully, her heart had nearly exploded in her chest. Luckily, Michael came right behind her and put his hand on her back before he opened the front door. Sophie kept her voice low, but said, Next time speak in a normal tone. Her sister's eyes widened and a smile grew on her face. Sophie turned around and saw her dark-haired cousin. She threw her hands open to hug her and said, Oh, Kimberly. Kimberly hugged her back while Michael closed the front door. You were coming to my house but instead you decided to help the FBI? Emily motioned she was leaving and then ran toward the beach. Sophie stood back and then held her hand out for Michael to join her. Once he did, she said. Actually, I almost made it to your house, but I ran into Michael's island instead. Kimberly shook his hand and nodded. Mr. Haniel, my husband said you lived a mile from us, though I've never met you. The ocean acts as a buffer from neighbors. Michael smiled but then glanced at Sophie as he said, we'll make an effort in the future. Sophie just told me she wants to head back to my island. Kimberly crossed her arms as if about to lecture them. Yes, don't be like my husband and not have a ship. The first winter in the castle was chilly without fires, but I've made some improvements. In such a private enclave, my cousin wouldn't be stuck worrying about her testimony or bad guys. Michael hugged Sophie close enough she could hear his steady heartbeat. She doesn't have that worry anymore. We were just talking about our upcoming wedding. But first, would you both like coffee? And something to eat? Sophie added fast and let him go. Thank you. He gave her that wink of his again and her skin jolted with desire. He then walked to the kitchen. Sophie motioned for Kimberly to come to the living room and hoped the couches were comfortable. She'd never sat on them before now. She sank on the white leather and relaxed into the bonded leather like it fit her body smoothly. Kimberly followed and took the seat next to her. Sophie, I'm so happy for you both. If you need anything, let me or Erica know. I know we'll both want to help. Her cousins. Good. Sophie lowered her head and felt a warmness grow from her heart to her cheeks. She still had her mother with her, even a little, when she spoke to her cousins. I've not talked to Erica in months. How is she? Kimberly laughed. Super pregnant or she'd have been here. She read the newspaper article about you both and sent it to me. I flew out the second I could. Having family meant that she and her sisters belonged somewhere. Her mother would want her to stay in contact. She glanced up and remembered their many family picnics where their moms would talk on the bench while the rest of them ran around the park. Sophie swallowed. Tell her I'll call her tonight and invite her. The Miras lost a lot, but it's good for all of us to still be a family. Kimberly pressed against Sophie's trembling knee. Your mom is missed a lot. I'm glad you're okay. I felt so bad when you didn't show up. I thought something awful had happened. Michael returned carrying a tray of coffee, biscuits, and somehow in the kitchen found a gray t-shirt. He joined her and scooted the coffee cups in front of her and her cousin while Sophie said, meeting Michael was the best. Again her sister's laughter from outside echoed in the house. Kimberly stood and looked down at both of them on the couch. I'll take a cup of coffee outside and say hello to Emily, Isabel, and Abigail. They are growing so fast. She let herself out the back door toward the beach. Michael waited for a few seconds of silence and swallowed his coffee. That was your cousin? I had wondered why she hadn't come looking for us. She gave me the impression the other day when we talked on the phone. When did you call her last? When we arrived at your beach house. We talked almost daily after my mother died until the day we sailed. She's made an effort to be there for me when Mom died and offered to help when no one else did. Michael handed her the basket of biscuits. Her stomach growled as she accepted. Then she's more than welcome in our home. She took the offered bread in her hand but whispered as she scooted toward him. I love you. He kissed her forehead again and her heart felt like it grew. Good, because I love you too. You're my gift from God. She shook her head when he let her go and met his gaze. Don't put me on a pedestal, Michael. I just want us to live happily ever after. Whatever you say, my sweet. He laughed and put their coffees down. Then he wrapped his arms around her and kissed her. He tasted better than any food she might eat, and he'd last longer. She planned on forever. His quest for vengeance and her need for protection were now over and they were free to just love. Everything was perfect. Thank you for reading. I hope you enjoyed Michael and Sophie as much as I did. The next book, the Frosted Game of Hearts series, takes place 10 years later and stars Emily and Dane, involving a treasure hunt and a romance that blossoms. Order Dane now. Also, if you love Heather Graham and the holidays, then please pre-order our boxed set with 22 other authors. Holiday Fake Out will only be out for a month. After checking out Dane, check out my preview for my story based on While You Were Sleeping in the Set. And to find out about new books, sign up for my newsletter, https://victoriapinder.com, also by Hell. Returning for Valentine's free if you go to my website. The House of Morgan, Secret Crush, Secret Baby, Secret Bet, Secret Wish, Secret Dad, Secret Hair, Secret Tryst, Secret Date, Secret Romeo, Secret Caress, Secret Match, Secret Bridesmaid, Secret Admirer, Secret Cowboy, Secret Mistress, Secret Cinderella, Secret Lover New, The House of Morgan Boxed Set 1-3, The House of Morgan Boxed Set 4-6, The The House of Morgan boxed set 7-9, The House of Morgan boxed set 10-12, The House of Morgan boxed set 13-15, Steel series, Rocking Player, Ruthless Financier, Wicked Cowboy, Powerful Prince, Cocky MD, Scottish Seducer, Legendary Rock Star, Charming Boyfriend, Fierce Fighter, Treasured, Related Steel Friends Stories, Scottish Wedding Date, A Scot for Christmas, Scottish Second Chance, Scottish New Year Bride, Virgin Cove, The One That Got Away, No Regrets, Never Again, Eat Your Heart Out, Crying Shame, Princes of Afs, Forbidden Crown, Forbidden Prince, Forbidden Royal, Forbidden Duke, Forbidden Earl, Forbidden Monsieur, Forbidden Marquis, Forbidden Count, Forbidden King, Forbidden Bastard, Forbidden Noble, Forbidden Lord, Princes of Avs 1-3, Princes of Avs 4-6, Princes of Avs 7-9, The Hawk Fortune, Tempting Gabe, Tempting James, Tempting Connor, Tempting Harry, Tempting Navid, Hawk Series, Married to the Billionaire Prince, Irresistibly Lost, Irresistibly Found, Irresistibly Charming, Irresistibly Tough, Irresistibly Played, Irresistibly Rugged, Irresistibly Strong, Irresistibly Dashing, Irresistibly Box Set 3-5, Irresistibly Boxed Set 6-8, Hidden Alphas, Hidden Gabriel, Hidden Raphael, Hidden Rocco, Hidden Alphas Boxed Set, Adventure Romance, Michael, Dane, The Marshall Family Saga, Favorite Crush, Favorite Mistake, Favorite Sin, Favorite Scandal, The Collins Brothers, Chaperoning Paris, Borrowing the Doctor, Gerard, Liam, Eric. Then if you also like science fiction fantasy romance, Hidden Dragon series, Call of the Dragon, Dawn of the Dragon, Escape of the Dragon coming soon, The Queen Jean, Whispers of a Throne, Storm of the Throne coming soon, Earthseeker's Mission, Makeup May Change Your Life, The Zoroastra Affair, Ancient Greek Heroes, Romancing Theseus, My Thing the Throne, About the Author. USA Today best-selling author. Victoria Pinder grew up in Irish Catholic Boston, then moved to Miami, eventually found that writing is her passion. She always wrote stories to entertain herself. Her parents are practical-minded people demanding a job, but when she sat down to see what she enjoyed doing, writing became obvious. Visit my website and download a free novel www.victoriapinder.com. Victoria at victoriapinder.com.